Yo, what's up guys, hope you guys are doing good. So today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was kidnapped by Kumogakure the night of the Hyuga Incident, and trained him to become the ultimate weapon, part 2. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Darth Malleus. Link is in the description. And also subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's get into the video. Yujito had no idea how hungry she was until she stepped into the cafeteria. And upon the whiff of cooked food there was a sudden, almost deafening, to her at least, growl from her stomach. She looked around with a slight blush, only to relax when she saw the place was empty besides the kitchen staff, and a few off-duty ninja. The moment she, Naruto, and Jiraiya had chosen a table, a plate full of food was placed in front of her. A basic breakfast meal really. A large bowl of white rice, a large slab of grilled fish fillet with side pickles, a bowl of miso soup, some seasoned sheets of seaweed to wrap the fish and rice into, and a small bowl of fermented soybeans. Her eyes lit up like street torches at the fish. A rather strange side effect of having a Nikomata sealed inside you was that the host gained quite a lot of its demons' likes and dislikes. Because of this, Yujito loved fish at an almost fanatical level. To her, fish of almost any kind were considered the holiest creations on the planet. Her speed was blurring, and barely 30 seconds after the food was placed before her all that remained were spotless plates. Then she asked for another. Naruto and Jiraiya had been given the same dish. Yet by the time they finished their meals the blonde-haired Kumo Jonin had finished her third serving. Eating didn't do the performance justice. She inhaled the food. Leaning back in her chair with a content sigh, Nibi Jinchuriki looked a hair's breadth away from finding a nice quiet place to take a nap. Another side effect. She stopped when she saw the look on her young charge's face. For some reason he refused to meet her eyes, and this worried her. When he wanted something he had no problem going up to her and asking for it. Same when he had a problem he needed advice with. This shy and nervous kid was not the child she had looked after these few years. What's the matter, she asked, frowning. When he twiddled his thumbs she took on a more firm tone. Naruto, my eyes are here. She had never seen him look so uncomfortable about something in his life. So with a sigh she motioned him closer. If you're worried about it, just whisper it to me. For Jiraiya, warning bells were going off in his head, as well as a massive sign flashing neon red for get the hell out of there. Knowing in his subconscious exactly what the boy was about to ask about. If she pushed him for why, then he would see firsthand if his speculation about her strength being on par with another certain blonde female was right. Slowly he rose from his chair, sighing in relief when he saw her full attention was on Naruto. As he whispered something into her ear, and she replied in a hushed tone while taking a sip of her milk. He edged closer to the door, ignoring the questioning looks the assigned ANBU guards were giving him. Mom, Naruto said I saw something I think I shouldn't have seen. Such as? She asked with a raised brow. Well, when you went to get changed the big guy went into a room next door, he explained a little sheepishly, hand scratching the back of his head. I was bored, so I followed him in, and she motioned him to continue, taking another sip of her milk. It was one of those viewing rooms, he explained, seeing her form suddenly go stiff, you know, like the ones connected to those questioning rooms. It took a second for the information to filter to her brain, and when it did she spat out her milk, catching the attention of everyone else in the room. Looking over to him, white liquid dripping from the corners of her mouth, she asked the dreaded question, what was he observing? Now her charge really looked uncomfortable. Naruto asked, her tone forcing him to stare into suddenly merciless brown orbs. What was he observing? The child replied, almost looking like he wanted to run. You. Jiraiya had managed to sneak his way to the door when he felt a sudden, merciless stab of killing intent so utterly deadly it would have probably killed any plants in the immediate vicinity. There was only one other time he had felt intent so potent, and that was when Tsunade had caught him peeping on her in the public bath, and she had nearly killed him. Slowly he turned to see the Kumonin. He could have sworn her eyes had taken a sudden cerulean glow, and she was cracking her knuckles in a very threatening manner. You. It was more of a feline snarl than a voice. Jiraiya backed up, laughing nervously. Look, I had no idea the brat was in the room, I swear. And that makes it all right? She asked indignantly. He heard a snap, and looked at the chopsticks in her hands. What had him worried was that the chopsticks she had snapped like twigs with her fingers were made of stainless steel. If it makes you feel any better, you have a steaming hot figure, he said with a nervous laugh. What followed was a sudden maniacal look in her eyes, followed by a growl, and a lunge. The ANBU made no move to stop her. In fact, by how they backed away it was the last thing they wanted to do. For Mei and Suki, however, they were looking on with interest. Maybe she could finally beat some sense into the pervert. Jiraiya, Densetsu no Sannin, legendary Toad Sage, student to the Sandame, and Sensei to the Yandame, ran out the door screaming like a little girl, an irate blonde right on his heels, using the snapped chopsticks as needles. It was another 10 minutes before Yujito returned, taking a deep cleansing breath. As she walked past the staring Anbu to Naruto, she leaned forward, draping an arm over his shoulder, and gently pushing him back towards the table. She couldn't erase the memory from the child, but the next best thing she could do is steer him away from becoming another Jiraiya. With a sigh she looked up to her Anbu guards, and reaching into her pocket threw a small notebook at them. The woman with the wolf mask, Mei, instinctively caught the book. Do you know fire jutsu? The woman hesitated, before a small smile formed under the mask. Burn it? Yujito smiled back. Burn it. Naka Shrine was one of many clan shrines located around Konoha. Stone steps led up to a torii gate, the symbol of the Uchiha enshrined on the gateway, and a stone path leading to a large Honden shrine, a giant ornate building made of pine. To the citizens of Konoha, and anyone outside of the Uchiha clan, the shrine was a simple place of worship for the founding clan. However, the shrine was designed for another purpose. In the main hall, hidden by the 7 tatami mat from the far right, was a secret entrance, leading to a spiral staircase of stone steps, which in turn led to a secret room. Within this room it was dark, the only light coming from scented candles. The symbols of the Uchiha clan were imprinted on the walls, and at the far end of the small chamber was a stone tablet, pertaining to the most ancient history and secrets of the clan. In this room, seated cross-legged on plush cushions, were 5 men, dressed in crimson and white robes, their skin crinkled and weathered by age, their eyes hardened by the times they had lived. These 5 men represented the oldest and supposedly wisest of the Uchiha. They were the advisors to the clan head, each one a former shinobi who had unlocked the Sharingan eye. Fugaku Uchiha knew this. The current head of the Uchiha clan knew that these men and their experience were invaluable, and all were in agreement. The time when the Uchiha stayed on the sidelines was over. They were the last surviving founding clan of this village. The Senju were all but extinct. Their last survivor was off in some gambling hut throwing her money away. They should have more say in how this village is run. Sometimes Fugaku Uchiha wondered how it had gotten this bad. Then he remembered, and the memory filled him with rage. The Kyubi no Yoko. In one night a single demon laid waste to the shinobi forces of the Hidden Leaf. Many had died so that the Yondaime could seal it away, including several members of the Uchiha clan. He had spearheaded the campaign to kill the monster once, and for all, by mercifully putting down the child chosen to house the beast. He had felt pity for the boy, but he needed to remind himself that there was no boy. The child died the moment the demon was sealed. It needed to be done, but the Sandaime Hokage, forced out of retirement, had put a stop to everything. He had shot down his attempt, and put laws in place to protect the child, to protect it. What was worse were the rumors that suddenly started not long after the attack. Rumors that the Uchiha themselves had led the beast to their doorstep, that they were somehow behind the attack. These stories were false, but that didn't stop the village from relocating his clan to a corner of the village where they could be easily monitored. To the clan elders this was a sign that the warning spoken of by their founder, the long-deceased Madara Uchiha, was beginning to come to fruition. Enough was enough. The Uchiha would not be watched like a pack of rabid dogs. It was time for the Sharingan wielders to fight back, to retake this village from the lesser clans, but somehow the Council of Fire and the Hokage had caught wind of their plans. This infuriated Fugaku, and made all chances of a bloodless coup d'état impossible. But how could they have known? He and the elders had ordered that it strictly be kept secret. Even within the clan only those who held the rank of clan elder or shinobi knew of the attempt. Their civilian members knew nothing. He had even kept it a secret from his wife. Even though Mikoto was a jonin herself before she retired, she was not what the elders called a true Uchiha, having married into the clan. It was Hideki Uchiha, one of the eldest in attendance, who said, "Tell me, Fugaku-sama, what are the results of your investigation? Have you found the informant yet?" "Not, as such, Hideki-san," the head replied. "The investigation is still ongoing. Whoever the informer is, he has hidden his tracks very well." "This is most troubling." Kazuko Uchiha spoke, his voice raspy, and ancient. "To think one of our own would willingly betray us. As troubling as it is, Kazuko-san, the fact that the Hokage and the council have caught wind of our plans is proof enough that one of our own has become a spy." Osamu Uchiha said sternly, the 50-year-old man massaging his trimmed dark gray mustache. "What about what Chunin?" Hideki said, looking at Fugaku. "Could one of them not be as loyal as you let on?" "The Chunin know next to nothing about the coup," the clan head replied calmly. "Nothing other than that if we did instigate one we would have their support." Osamu growled, "Most of these Chunin are low class, not from any prestigious clans. How can we trust such commoners at their words?" There was a buzz of agreement all around. "What about your son Fugaku-sama?" Yuma Uchiha asked. "You've placed him in Anbu as a spy. What information has he gained?" Very little, Fugaku replied, other than the Sandaime is more interested in trying to negotiate a settlement instead of fighting us openly. A smirk appeared on Hideki's face. Hiruzen is getting senile in his old age. The fool is becoming a pacifist, believing that everything can be settled through discussion. Hiruzen is many things Kazuko spoke about, but a fool is not one of them. He hates bloodshed, yes, but to him the village is worth more than any individual clan. If we push him too hard, then he will push back. Hiruzen is not so much the problem, as Danzo Yuma growled. That one-armed mummy has gone to a lot of trouble to spit in our faces. It's almost like he is daring us to make the first move. Do you fear that cripple Unisan, the last elder? Minoru Uchiha spoke up at last, remaining quiet during most of the meeting. Do you fear him, and his half-trained root? It is foolish and stupid to not take a threat like Danzo seriously, Yuma replied. And you underestimate his root, Minoru-san. They may not be a match for a well-trained jonin one-on-one, but they're not supposed to be. Root operatives are trained as assassins and spies. They strike from the shadows and melt back into the darkness once their task is complete. They fear nothing, not even death. Enough, Fugaku growled, smacking the table with his fist. Look at you all. You are acting like a bunch of scared rabbits. Is this really the mighty council of the Uchiha clan? As one the five elders bowed. We apologize, Fugaku-sama, Hideki intoned. However, our chances of victory are slim. I propose we back away for now, and wait for another opportunity to strike. Murmurings rose up among the elders, silenced by Fugaku's raised hand. Wait for our enemies to drop their guard, then strike for their exposed neck. Very well, I agree. Sarutobi glowered over his desk at the scene, hands stapled together, and generally trying to look threatening. At the far end of the room was Jiraiya, trying to look cool and in control when in fact he was sporting a black eye, his clothes riddled with several small holes from near misses. So the old man began calmly, shooting a sorely disappointed look at Jiraiya's way. Please explain this all to me. He peeped on you while you were changing, and when you were informed of his, activities, you chased him through the halls of ANBU headquarters, utilizing chopsticks as weapons with the seals still firmly in place to boot. Yujito nodded, throwing a murderous glare the Sanin's way which promised pain and possible decapitation if he did it again. The Gamma Senin actually physically flinched under her gaze. And what were the ANBU doing during all of this? Hiruzen asked. Yeah, where were you guys? The Sannin exclaimed. She could have killed me. Suki and Mei looked at each other for a moment, before shrugging. We thought the great and gallant Jiraiya-sama was more than capable of dealing with the shinobi who had her chakra suppressed. The Sannin shot them a hurt look, but any further talk was silenced by the Sandaime clearing his throat. Yujito-san, he said, gaining her attention, I take it you called me for more than to complain about my students' questionable activities. Yes, Hokage-sama, she replied, before looking down to the floor for a moment, her eyes uncertain. Battling an internal battle of emotions, I would like to request asylum for Naruto and me. She had been thinking about this the entire night, and, as much as she wanted to take Naruto and run, Yujito knew that was impossible. The next best option was to seek sanctuary in another village, preferably another one of the 5 great shinobi villages. It was common knowledge that once a ninja became a member of a village, they were protected by the village, and nowhere else was more zealous in this belief than Konoha. Yujito was also no fool. They knew who Naruto was, and they would never willingly allow her to leave with him. The Hokage took a puff of his pipe, as if in deep thought. Before opening the drawer to his desk, there are certain procedures that need to be followed when a shinobi considered. A Nukenin wishes to enter our village. He placed the Hadeite of the leaf on the desk, the metal, adorned with the symbol of the hidden leaf, polished to a shine. First, you will need to adhere to a mind examination by a Yamanaka to make sure your wish is genuine. Second, you will be put through a series of tests to assess your skill level. These exams will test your knowledge of ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, weapons knowledge, and battle tactics. The second is a prohibition period of no less than 3 months to test if you are truly sincere in your wish. You will be guarded by a select group of my ANBU operatives during this time. It may be best to put a cover story in place about her origins. Hokage-sama, Jiraiya spoke up, his tone deadly serious once again. Hiruzen nodded in agreement. What do you plan to do with Naruto? She asked suddenly. For now I will allow him to remain with you. Hiruzen replied, I have a feeling a stipulation of you staying is that the two of you are not separated. She nodded. But that leaves us with a dilemma. The Sandaime took another puff. As to where the two of you are to stay until you can afford a place of your own. They can stay in one of my apartments. Everyone turned to look at Jiraiya, who smirked. The one in the Shinobi district should do what I think. 2-bedroom, open floor living room, and kitchen, a single fully stocked bathroom, and a decent view. The young woman raised an eyebrow suspiciously. What's the catch? I just want to make sure my godson is looked after. Jiraiya Hiruzen spoke up warningly. The Sannin frowned at him. She's going to be his guardian, so she might, As well know a few things. He stared the woman in the eyes. Unflinching, Naruto is my godson, chosen by both his father and mother. It took a while for the information to sink in, but when it did, Yujito stared venomously at him, wondering where this man was all of Naruto's young life. So where were you? She asked harshly. When I found him, he was sitting on a swing, drenched by the storm, and shivering while the orphanage workers locked him out. If he didn't have his prisoner, he would have died of pneumonia. You were there? Jiraiya asked incredulously. All in the room knew what he was talking about. I was one of the ambassador's guards, she replied, knowing that if she wanted these people's trust she needed to tell them everything. Sarutobi sighed. The Hyuga are going to love this if they ever found out. And you were okay with trying to kidnap a 4-year-old girl? I didn't attempt to kidnap her, Yujito shot back. We were ordered to remain at the hotel. The guards weren't told the true purpose of the peace talks until the day before. We were told what would happen, and were to leave if the attempt failed. That was it. She stared at him. You're changing the topic. Where the hell were you when he needed you? Both men looked at each other. Even the ANBU looked uncertain. In her mind, the Nibi Jinchuriki knew they would be asking questions about her involvement later. But now there were other issues that needed to be sorted. Pressing issues that in her mind were more important than a 4-year-old village feud. This time it was Jiraiya's turn to growl. I spent the entirety of his first 4 years trying to protect him. Do you know how many kidnap and assassination attempts were made against the boy in that time? I personally foiled 9 kidnap and 15 assassination attempts, not to mention the 50 others that were never implemented because of my spy network. He needed more than protecting her all, but shouted in agitation. He needed someone to be there for him. Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up all alone, to have no one there to look out for you or be there when you get home? She knew from personal experience. She had lost her mother and father when she was young, and most of her family soon after. It was only her and her younger sister. He needed more than a silent protector from the shadows. He needed a father figure, someone to tuck him in at night, someone to soothe him when he was scared, someone to worry about him when he didn't come home. She knew this from experience. Damn, did the cub do a number on her stress levels during their first year together? He used to be plagued by terrible nightmares, terrified that people hated him when someone looked at him funny, and that was just his emotional baggage. His manners and personal hygiene were atrocious. To put it bluntly, he had been a mess, a well-hidden one, but a mess. Jiraiya sighed, his tension leaving his muscles. I know. His response surprised her. She was expecting a retort. I know I wasn't there when the kid needed me, but I will be making up for it starting now, by giving you that apartment. He smiled sadly at her. I didn't do the job right, and his parents would have been ashamed of me. His mother would have beaten me to a bloody pulp, and his father would have probably killed me. But he has a sister figure in you. You were there when he needed you, and for that I am grateful. She was dumbstruck by such a display, her opinions of this man suddenly taking a U-turn. Suddenly a thought hit her. You knew his parents? Yes, he replied, ignoring the Hokage's threatening glare. Who were they? Unfortunately, I can't tell you that, at least not until I know I can trust you. The Sannin replied. I can tell you that while they were alive they made a lot of enemies outside of the village. Enemies who would have no qualms about killing their son for a twisted sense of revenge. She nodded, and after a moment of silence, bowed her head. Are you sure it's okay to just give me the apartment? He smiled sheepishly. I haven't been in there for the better part of a decade. Besides, I have another 2 apartments, and a house in this village. He reached into his pocket, and tossed her a set of keys. It's all yours. Now we definitely need a cover story for you. And Naruto Hiruzen said after a moment, frowning that the Sannin let slip that he was the boy's godfather, but glad he kept tight-lipped about everything else. They would talk about it later if the Hyuga found out. The situation could get messy. There is a civil war going on in Mizuno Kuni at the moment, Jiraiya thought out loud. Quite a few refugees are fleeing the country. A broad grin emerged. You and your little brother are refugees from Mizuno Kuni. You were originally a shinobi of Kirigakure, but your clan was betrayed by the Mizukage. With no other options, you took your little brother and fled to Hai no Kuni. The room was silent, and then the Hokage spoke. If one didn't know any better, one would think you were a talented author. The middle-aged man looked pointedly at his former sensei. What do you mean, old man? I am an author. The Sandaime shook his head, before setting his eyes on Yujito once again. I will send for a Yamanaka immediately to take care of the mind examination, and if he is satisfied, then I will have Jiraiya remove your seal. Once that is done, you are to report to Training Area 12 at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. I will send one of my ANBU to put you through the tests. When that is over, return here with Naruto in the afternoon so that we can enroll him in the academy. Yujito nodded her affirmative. If it eases your concerns, I will volunteer for the mind examination. Excellent, the old man smiled, before sounding the buzzer at the end of his desk. A few seconds passed before his secretary, a female chunin, peeped her head through the door. You called Hokage-sama? Is Inoichi-san in the waiting room? Yes, Hokage-sama, she replied with a nod. Thank you, Nimu-chan, he said with a smile. Has your uncle been waiting long? Nimu Yamanaka shook her head. No, Hokage-sama. Only for about 5 minutes or so. The Hokage hummed let him in, and closed the doors. Don't let anyone else enter until I say otherwise. She nodded, and left for the waiting room. A few moments later she reappeared with another individual. A man in his middle years. His skin, although rugged by age, was not wrinkled, his eyes a dark blue, hair a dark blonde done up in a long ponytail. He wore the jonin attire, black trousers, and jacket, a jonin vest, and over it a sleeveless maroon long coat, the headband of the leaf tied to his forehead. Hokage-sama, Jiraiya-sama, he greeted with a respectful bow before setting his gaze upon Yujito, who met it unflinchingly. Inoichi-san, thank you for coming, Hiruzen returned with a smile. Yujito is Inoichi Yamanaka, head of the Yamanaka clan. Inoichi, this is Yujito ni. Yujito knew of the Yamanaka clan. Of all the clans of Konoha, they were one of the newest to have joined, becoming a major clan of the village just before the outbreak of the Third Shinobi World War. Their numbers were medium, around 80 to 100 strong, and those of them who became ninja excelled, as experts of mind reading, and controlled jutsu. To this day the head scientists of Kumo did not know whether the Yamanaka were just skilled in the field of interrogation, or had a Kekkei Genkei. The Yamanaka hesitated for a moment before offering her his hand. Nice to meet you, Yujito replied, accepting his offered hand. Yujito is formerly a member of Kumogakure. The former caretaker of Naruto Uzumaki, the Sandaime explained, knowing full well it was best to inform him now rather than him stumbling upon it later. Inoichi's eyes widened slightly at this, but he remained silent, allowing the Hokage to continue. She fled with Naruto from Kumogakure after a certain series of events, and wishes to join our village so as to protect him. He looked Inoichi in the eye. What I told you, and am about to tell you, will be an S-class secret. Do you understand? Inoichi nodded. I want you to scan her mind to see if what she says is genuine, though I have little doubt that it is, he explained. Also I must warn you, she herself is a Jinchuriki to a Biju, and although it is one of weakest, I advise you not to probe too deeply. I will keep it at bay. Hokage-sama, Yujito spoke up, ignoring the Yamanaka clan head's fearful look. I have nothing to hide. Are you sure you can suppress it? Although I do not have full control over her, I can tell you that of all the Biju, the Nikomata is the most docile. She will not lash out unless she feels threatened, or if I ask her to, Yujito said with a smile, before looking thoughtful for a moment, folding her arms under her bust, and tapping a finger against her chin. She's actually really lazy. As well as this, I would like for you to probe her memories of 4 years ago, Sarutobi added, casting a look the former Kumonin's way. She was one of the High Ninja's guardsmen during the Hyuga Incident, and I want to know if she had anything to do with the kidnap attempt. Hi, Hokage-sama, Inoichi replied with a bow, casting a suspicious look Yujito's way. Sarutobi looked to the elder blonde for confirmation, who shrugged. I will cooperate. The Sandaime looked thoughtful for a moment, before nodding, and motioning to a chair. Take a seat. Let's get this over with. The woman nodded before doing, as asked. As Inosahai loomed over her, she began to fidget. So what am I supposed to do? Besides the situation, the head of the Yamanaka clan smiled nervously. Not used to doing a voluntary mind examination. Sit up straight, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and relax. She nodded and did, as asked. If you can hear me, Nibi, allow this man to probe my mind. Yujito could have sworn she heard a purr of agreement before the elder Yamanaka placed his right hand over her forehead. Then everything was still, and silent. A pin drop could have been heard. Then she felt it, a slight discomfort, like faint wisps of shadow were seeping through her skull into her mind. Involuntarily Yujito shivered, the tendrils felt so cold. Inoichi tried to keep his ministries as light as possible, his mind ghosting over the Kumonin's memories with as much care as he could muster. He saw images of her childhood, the training she went through, and her time as a shinobi. He did not linger on these, and carefully nudged them aside so he could delve further, and gain the information he needed. He stood in a street, one he recognized, as the main road of Konoha. A celebration was taking place, people crowded on the sidewalks in the hundreds, as a procession of carriages and wagons slowly passed. He saw the High Ninja, and all of his guards, including a certain 16-year-old girl flanking him on his left side. He fast-forwarded the memories to the hotel they were staying in, and stopped. All 6 of the guardians had been assembled, and the ambassador was explaining the kidnap attempt to them. He was surprised when he felt her emotions of shock and disbelief at the news, even more surprised when she abruptly stood and excused herself, saying she needed a breath of fresh air. He watched, as she walked through the city streets, her mind a violent mixture of emotions and doubts. The teenager did not like the plan. This war had taken a lot from her. She had lost her grandfather, uncle and aunt, her last living relatives besides her sister, to the border skirmishes. Yujito did not hate Konoha for this, she just wanted the war to end. It was then that a little boy rushed around the corner, and bumped into her. She had been taken by surprise, and immediately turned to yell at the child, but upon seeing his eyes, reddened by tears, she hesitated. An old man came around the corner then, holding a cane threateningly, but by then she had already knelt beside the child. "Are you alright?" she asked softly. Inoichi watched, as she comforted the boy. So that was how they met. In truth, the clan head was appalled by how the orphanage employees ignored this deranged old man, as he threatened the child. Like the rest of the council, the Yamanaka had known of what the boy held prisoner, yet unlike Fugaku, he did not hate him for it. It's not like it was Naruto's fault that he was born on the same day as the Kyuubi attack. He sifted through a few more memories, and came to the conclusion that although she was there, she did not have knowledge of the Hyuga abduction until a few hours before the fact, and she did not partake in the attempt. She did kidnap Naruto, but she thought she was giving him a better life while doing so. It could be forgiven. His first task done, the Yamanaka moved forward to the newer, fresher memories of the last few weeks, checking through them several times over to make sure Yujito was giving him the correct information. The memories swarmed across his vision. At his rate of progress, he may never fully master the 9 tails of his transformation. The Kyuubi's chakra is just too vast and potent that its consciousness would encompass and take over his host. He would become more of a danger to the village then. As its protector, the scientist suddenly shut his report, his eyes partially hidden behind his round glasses, unless he let the word hang in the air, not caring to reiterate further. The Refuge tapped his finger against the surface of his desk in impatience, before sighing, "Unless what?" "Unless we put him through the full conditioning." Yujito growled at this. The full conditioning, more like torture. The subject would be conditioned both mentally and physically to become a weapon. She didn't know the details, but what she did know was that the practice was cruel and inhumane in every sense of the words. When the training was complete, the subject would lose all emotion. He would basically become a hollow shell of what he once was, the perfect killer. The Refuge growled at the scientist for a moment. If we did that, the boy would be nothing more than a shell of what he is now. No emotions, no individual thought. He would be stripped of all that makes him who he is. Such barbarism has been outlawed. It is regrettable, the scientist replied, his almond eyes gleaming with a sick joy behind his glasses, but necessary. I will be putting this forward in the council meeting later today. But your agreement would make this much faster, he replied without hesitation, fixing the scientist with a glare which would have melted steel, lips twisted in a sneer of disgust. "And I will fight this motion of yours with tooth and nail. There is a reason why I banned all forms of that training, and I doubt you will gain enough support on the council to overrule me." A smile adorned the old man's face. "Of course, Refuge-sama, but I will still put my recommendations forward when the council meeting begins." "You are welcome to do so, Sakamoto," the Refuge said tightly, "and my opinion will remain the same. Now leave me." "Yujito, by order of the Council of Lightning, you are hereby relieved. As guardian to the Kyuubi host, Uzumaki Naruto," he spoke in a deep voice which left no room for argument, before trying to push past her. "On whose authority?" she asked, unmoving. "The ANBU frowned. By authority of the Council of Lightning. I answer only to the Refuge," she replied coldly. "As do you. You think I enjoy being their lapdog, Captain?" The man spat in annoyance. "If I had my way, I would tell them to shove this order up their asses, but I can't. Now stand aside." "Not a chance," she said, standing doggedly in place, ready to use her position as a captain in the ANBU Corps to her advantage. "I'm your superior, boy, and I think I deserve to at least take him there myself instead of allowing him to be led off by a bunch of complete strangers." The ANBU looked to his associate. "Sakamoto isn't going to like this." Yujito's growl was feral, making the two elites flinch. "Either you go against Sakamoto with these jokes for orders, and get lightly reprimanded, or you go against me, and get a broken nose, and a demotion. Your call, boy." The ANBU hesitated for a moment. Before his face fell. "You have 1 hour to report him to headquarters to begin his training." "We'll be there," she snarled before slamming the door shut in their faces with a resounding thwack. As the lift continued to descend, she came down to a knee so that she was face to face with him, removing her mask and attaching it to her belt before she stared into his brilliant sapphire eyes. "You have everything right?" He nodded. "Don't let him push you around, Naruto. Don't let him do anything you don't like nor want. You got me?" He nodded again. She was about to speak, then stopped, tried again, and failed again. Finally her face fell, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "Look at me. The child I care for like a son is about to go into the lion's den, and I don't know what to say." She felt her eyes glisten, but stubbornly refused to let them fall. The old persona, as the ice cat coming into play for a moment, tightly shut her eyes, and willed for the tears to stop. A hand was on her shoulder, startling her. She glanced up, and saw him look at her with a genuine smile. "I know you're not my real mom," he said, "but you've been more of a mother to me than anyone else ever has. I was all alone in Konoha. I was hated, feared, and people even tried to kill me. You took me away from that. You gave me a home, a family, people who cared about me. You gave my life meaning." He seemed conflicted, scared, and uncertain, as he spoke the next few words. "I know this seems selfish, but can I still call you Mom? You know, if we ever meet again?" The tears flowed, and without a moment's hesitation she put her arms around him, and dragged him into an embrace, shutting her eyes tightly, as she cried, "Yes, I would like that, Naruto. I would like that so much. You're going, aren't you?" She stopped, but did not turn around. "I love Naruto too, but think about it. He wouldn't want you to do this. How else am I going to get him out of there?" Yujito asked, turning her head for a side glance at her younger sister. "Yujito Wunshin," Samui whispered pleadingly, "if you do this then you will be labeled as a missing nin. Isama will not be able to defend you. You'll play right into that bastard's hands, and you'll be in that cell beside Naruto. Do you think he would want that?" "I won't let him become a monster," the elder said, reaching into her vest, and pulling out a small scroll from one of her abdomen satchels. She walked to her little sister, and handed it to her. "Give this to the Refuge. When this is all said and done, it will expunge you and Karabi from any wrongdoing." Samui hugged herself, looking at her elder sister pleadingly. "Sis, please don't." She smiled behind her mask. "Goodbye, Samui." Before her sister could try to stop her, Yujito moved. Her attack was a blur, her hand chopping the nerves on her sister's neck. Samui's eyes bulged before closing. She fell into her sister's arms, carrying her into her apartment, and setting her on her living room couch. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Looking back at her little sister one last time, she closed her apartment door, and vanished in a flash. "Sorry." She ran across the rooftops, Naruto slung to her back. The boy was unconscious, and sickly pale, obviously having been put through extensive sessions of his training. She gritted her teeth at the word. Was this what could have happened to her, and Killer Bee? Finally she reached the last building, seeing the huge vertical structure of the outer defensive wall of her village stretch up to the heavens. She stopped, feeling a sense of déjà vu. This reminded her so much of 4 years ago, when she was scaling the walls of Konohagakure with this child on her back. Now she was doing the same thing again, only this time it was in her home village. Concentrating chakra into the soles of her feet, she jumped, landing on the wall, and effortlessly running up the vertical structure. She reached the top, seeing an empty corridor which would have been filled with long-range specialists during a siege or a time of war. She looked back upon her home, her eyes hidden behind her mask, confining every contour of the rocky structures to memory. Suddenly a voice resounded from the darkness, "Going somewhere, Yujito?" She turned, and her heart literally jumped up to her throat. There stood the Refuge, fully dressed in his robes of office, looking upon her with eyes as hard as diamonds. She was no match for him, no matter the situation. But something changed. He looked upon her, diamond-hard eyes softening before stepping aside. She hesitated, thinking for a moment that it was a trick. Then she walked across the corridor between the village and the outside world. She gave the Refuge one last glance. He stood with his head bowed, eyes closed, as if in penance. In 6 hours he spoke, his voice saddened. "I won't be able to keep it a secret much longer. I will be forced to list you as a nuke-nin, and send a hunter team after you." He looked into her eyes, conflicted as to what to say next. Then he closed his eyes and bowed his head again. "Go." She hopped up to the battlements, looking down at the seemingly bottomless abyss in front of her, but something in her stopped. She turned, locking eyes with the Refuge. "Sorry," she whispered before she leaned back and fell from the battlements. Inoichi broke the meld, removing his hand from the girl's forehead before turning to the Hokage. "She is telling the truth on both accounts, Hokage-sama. In my opinion she is not a threat to the village." Hiruzen nodded. "Thank you, Inoichi." Stay a moment. He then turned to Yujito, and smiled softly. "Thank you for your cooperation. I know that would have been difficult." She nodded, a hand on her head in a vain attempt to stop the drum pounding against her skull. Although the Yamanaka had tried to be careful, the presence of a foreign entity was still a stressful encounter. "Jiraiya will remove the seal and show you to your new apartment. Until I gather a trustworthy team of ANBU, he will continue to be your protector," Sarutobi explained, sending a pointed look at the Sannin, only to find him nodding in agreement. "Get a good night's sleep, and prepare for the examination tomorrow." Yujito nodded, rising from her chair, and bowing respectfully to the Hokage before turning to leave, the old sagely voice of Hiruzen reaching her before she made it to the door. "Oh, and if your examiner is a little late, don't hold it against him." She turned to him with a frown. "How long is a little?" All was quiet when the young woman excused herself and left the Hokage's office, It remained quiet for a few fleeting moments after, and only after Hiruzen Sarutobi took a long puff of his pipe did he turn to his chief information extractor. Chocolate brown orbs locked with dark blue for a handful of heartbeats. Then finally the old man closed his eyes in contemplation. Inoichi, I want you to tell me whatever extra information you were able to glean from her mind. Her life, the circumstances surrounding their flight from Kumo, everything. The Yamanaka clan had nodded, of course Hokage-sama. But my gleaning of her life was little to nothing. I did not pay much attention to those memories. I understand, the Sandaime replied, but still, tell me what you have learned. Hi, Inoichi said, before clearing his throat, and taking a breath. She was made host to the Biju at the age of 2. Her parents both died during the Third Shinobi World War along with most of her clan, and what few members survived died in the border skirmishes with us 4 years ago, all, but her sister. Hiruzen nodded his head. The Third Shinobi World War struck every country in the elemental nations hard. Konohagakure and her allies had been attacked by an alliance of Suna and Iwa, while at the same time Iwagakure was waging a war with Kumogakure to retake land usurped during the Second Shinobi World War some 10 years before. Many small nations had been swallowed up by Tsuchi no Kuni during that war, including Kaijin no Kuni and Yuzu no Kuni. Several independent shinobi clans, once numbering in the hundreds before the war, were almost completely wiped off the face of the earth. If she lost family to the border skirmishes, then wouldn't that mean she may not see Konoha in a good light? Jiraiya asked, truly curious. Inoichi shrugged. She mourned their deaths, but she held no hate for anyone. It seemed that she just wanted the war to end, and was happy about the upcoming peace talks. But when the head ninja revealed his plans, she felt disgusted and betrayed. I see, Hiruzen replied, then motioned him to continue. It was while she stalked out of the hotel to clear her head that she ran into Naruto. He was being chased by a deranged old man, and ran into her. Yujito protected him from the old goat, rattled him a good bit too, but then the fool spilled that he was a Jinchuriki. The ANBU tried to dispel her opinions, but obviously it didn't work. He stopped to catch a breath. The attempt failed, and she was retreating to a rendezvous point when she ran into Naruto again. He was locked out of the orphanage, soaked to the bone. She took him, and fled back to Kumo with a few survivors, whom Sarutobi hummed in deep thought, stopping a frown from forming. He was going to have ANBU bring in the orphanage workers responsible, and send them to Ibiki for a few hours, should scare them good. She took him in. According to her memories, Naruto was a mess, albeit a well-concealed one. It took her 2 months to get him to open up to her, another 6 months before he became a regular kid again. So what happened in Kumo to warrant their fleeing? An elder, Sakamoto or something like that, sabotaged Naruto's training in taming the Kyuubi. Or so she believes. Inoichi replied he got the council to back him, and overruled the raikage. Naruto was forced apart from Yujito and her sister, and after 3 days she snapped, and went after him. He shook his head, disturbed by the image of a pale Naruto, looking beat up, and almost deathly tired. Whatever the man put him through was harsh, and if she hadn't have gotten him out when she did, then I don't know what would have happened. Both Hiruzen and Jiraiya looked at Inoichi expectantly, awaiting any further information. The rest you can piece together. She fled Kumo, had Hunter Nine sent after her, then she met Jiraiya-sama. The Sandaime Hokage leaned back in his chair, taking a long puff of his pipe. Silence persevered for several heartbeats before the Yamanaka clan head cleared his throat, and spoke again. If I may speak, Hokage-sama. The old man nodded. It will only be a matter of time until the village realizes that Naruto is back, and while hatred for the Kyuubi has decreased over the years, it has not vanished, especially among the civilian council. I agree, Jiraiya piped up, and the fact that his protector is also a Jinchuriki will make them really fuss about it. Safeguards need to put in place for their protection. The Sandaime nodded. The rule pertaining to Naruto's condition is still in effect. We just add her to the rule. Simple as that. No one who already knows should know. Yujito is prohibited from using her powers in the village unless it is a life or death situation. Both men nodded. You will have the support of my clan if their identities become known, Hokage-sama. Inoichi spoke up. And while I cannot say for certain, you will probably have the support of the Akimichi, Nara, and Inuzuka. The aging Hokage nodded with a small smile. Thank you, Inoichi-san. No, I have kept you from your family for too long. You are excused. Thank you, Hokage-sama, the blonde replied, before turning and leaving the office. Silence prevailed for several heartbeats, as Sarutobi and Jiraiya stared at each other. Finally, after a long moment, the Sandaime Hokage spoke. Was there a need to reveal your position as Naruto's godfather? The Gamasenin shrugged. I stayed as a shadow once, and I failed to protect him. I won't fail a second time. Jiraiya Hiruzen said firmly. I understand your wish to protect Naruto, but your closeness to Minato and Kushina will raise questions on who the boy's parents were, and if rumors spread to other villages, then the boy's life will be at risk. I understand, Sarutobi-sensei. I understand that you want Naruto to be old enough to be able to protect himself before you reveal his parentage to him. And the village, the Sannin replied, leaning forward, but I refuse to just sit idly by and watch any longer. I made a promise to both Minato and Kushina, and I will live up to it this time. So you plan on telling him that you're his godfather, the Hokage asked, and at his student's nod side you know the question he will ask, and I will answer him. Sarutobi frowned, sagging into his chair. I can't convince you otherwise, can I? Too late for that, old man, the die has been cast. Yes, he replied, before finding something interesting about his desk remove the seal, and then take them to your apartment. Hi, Jiraiya replied, and for the first time in years left the Hokage's office not through the window, but through the door. With care he walked across the ringed corridors of the palace's top level, his nose picking up the smells of the worn oak walls, and enjoying the fading rays of the setting sun. This was one of the first structures to be built, right under the grand cliff face of the Hokage mountain. This great building was the central pillar of the village, the other buildings, and roads snaking from it like the veins and arteries of some great creature. Finally he came to his destination, and opening the door saw both Yujito and Naruto speaking in hushed tones, seemingly ignoring the 3 ANBU guards in the rafters above. They obviously knew they were there. Both looked up when they saw Jiraiya enter. The kid was still unsure of him, but the older blonde gave him an amused smile. What's up, Ero-senin? Ero-senin, he asked, in both mild shock and agitation. Ero-senin. Something the kid thought up there now, she replied with a smirk. Personally I think it fits. Don't call me that, he whined childishly, it'll ruin my reputation. Both blondes raised eyebrows at this, and it was Naruto who spoke, his voice laced with skepticism. You have a reputation. Course I do, but Jiraiya replied indignantly, before turning to face Yujito. I am the great and powerful Jiraiya. The ship on your reputation has sailed, old man, Yujito muttered. Hey, what? It's true, Jiraiya sighed. Before fixing his gaze on the older blonde, the Hokage has given the go-ahead to removing the seal. He motioned to a couch at the side of the small meeting chamber. Lie on there for me, and I'll get this done. Yujito frowned at him, then nodded, and turned to Naruto. Could you wait outside for a moment? I have some business to take care of. Removing the seal, huh? Yeah, I heard that really hurts, he said, as if absently, yet she could see the worry in his expressive blue eyes. She gave him a grin. Don't worry, I bet you I felt worse. I'll make it as quick as I can, the Sannin added, so she won't be in pain for long. As an ANBU led Naruto out of the room, Jiraiya waited for his charge to lie down on the couch and pull up her black shirt just enough to reveal her navel and the seal surrounding it. He inspected it for a moment. It was a simple seal compared to the one on Naruto, but whoever created it knew how strong it needed to be to keep the Nibi safely contained, yet weak enough to allow the Jinchuriki to tap into its power source. So how is this going to work? I'd grit my teeth if I were you, was his reply, as he looked into her almond eyes. He blurred through a set of hand signs, coating his palm in fiery blue chakra, and placing it on her stomach muttered a single word, Kai. A sizzling sound followed, as the suppression seal was basically burned off her skin. Yujito's hands dug into the leather sofa, sharpened nails piercing through. She grit her teeth, as her skin felt like it was being burned, proud that all she allowed through her lips was a pained whimper. Finally, mercifully, Jiraiya removed his hand, and her pain slowly numbed to an ache. Yujito felt her chakra flow through her body again, like a soothing balm just under her flesh, and a voice echoed inside her head. Hello, kitten. Hello, Nibi. So what do I miss? We've just been granted sanctuary by the Sandaime Hokage and Jiraiya of the Sannin. Humph, humans, and their titles, the Biju replied, before being silent for a while, as if in contemplation. Oi, Lady Jiraiya called, are you done phasing out or what? Sorry, she replied. Best get going to this apartment of yours, and get some sleep. The Nikomata piped up. You have a ranking examination tomorrow. 5 minutes is a little late. 15 minutes is a little late. Even half an hour can be contributed as a little late if it was sweet-coated enough. 2 hours is not a little late. 2 hours is a blatant insult. The young woman had waited patiently in the clearing for a half an hour, and then she started pacing. At the moment Yujito was falling upon her basic feline instincts. She had found a shaded resting place, under one of the perimeter trees, where she could relax and wait for her extremely late proctor to arrive. It had all seemed to be going well for her, after an uncomfortable mind examination by the Yamanaka, who also was the clan head of said clan. She had been cleared of any possible involvement in the Hyuga incident 4 years ago. She did kidnap Naruto, but the Sandaime considered bringing him back gave her a clean slate. Jiraiya had removed the seal that cut off her chakra, and after a conversation with the Nibi to fill her in, she and Naruto were escorted to their new apartment. During the short walk she was relieved that they were led there in the evening, when nearly no one was around, and those who they did pass didn't seem to recognize Naruto. Yujito, truth be told, was worried when, not if, the population learned that he was back. She worried what they might do to him. Jiraiya had tried to reassure her, but Yujito had told him that if his life was threatened by anyone she would use crippling, or even deadly force. The Sand Ninja smirked, and gave her permission to do so. His exact words were good, rip the bastard's limb from limb. She had been surprised yet again, expecting him to try, and convince her just to detain them or wait for the ANBU to intervene. Instead he basically gave her permission to dismember anyone who threatened Naruto's life, and made it abundantly clear that he would do the same. The apartment was located at the edge of the Shinobi district of the village, a block away from the market district. It was at the top level of a 3-story apartment block. A beautifully furnished accommodation whose front door leads to an open-plan living room, fully furnished with a couch, and 2 chairs, a large window, leading to a balcony giving a beautiful view of the village. To the right were a set of doors, each leading to a bedroom. 2 were single bedrooms while the other one was a master bedroom containing a king-sized double bed, both of which had their very own en-suite bathrooms. To the left was a live-in kitchen with everything they needed, but the lack of food in the fridge and freezer meant that Yujito would need to start making an income fast to keep them fed. Jiraiya said he would help them financially until she was certified as a shinobi of Konoha, which took a load of worry from her mind. She had slept well in her king-size bed, enjoying being able to stretch her body out. When she awoke at 8 in the morning her first instinct was to check on Naruto, and finding him sound asleep in his own room left to get ready for her examination, putting her full trust in the 2 ANBU watching the apartment from a nearby tree. Yujito was a woman who prided herself on her ability, but she also knew her weaknesses. She had above-average chakra reserves, almost Kage level, a master in taijutsu, particularly in her family's fighting style, and by extension had a talent in kenjutsu. Her ninjutsu was decent, although she always strived to improve. Her arsenal contains a small yet diverse array of lightning and earth-release jutsu, as well as an array of clone, substitution, and fast movement techniques. It was genjutsu, the art of illusion, that she considered her weak point. All Yujito knew was how to recognize and dispel illusions, as well as a handful of basic styles. Slowly she opened her eyes just a creak, and checked the sun's position. It was almost midday, and he still hadn't arrived. Even the ANBU shadowing her in a nearby tree looked a little agitated. With a sigh Yujito stretched her tired muscles with a groan. If he didn't arrive now he never would. A shadow fell upon her, and her eyes flew open to see the silhouette of a man. "Hey there," he greeted me in a relaxed voice. "You're my examiner?" she asked, physically relaxing while her mind was in turmoil. I didn't feel him approaching. "Yup." 3 hours later she intoned before rising to her feet, stretching her muscles again, as she took a look at the shinobi before her. 2.5 actually, the man replied sheepishly, and as to why, well, you see, a black cat crossed my path, so I had to take the scenic route. Somehow Yujito knew this was a lie. The man standing before her was definitely a jonin by his vest. He wore a black jacket, and pants under it with the usual sandals. His hair was silver, with spikes that seemed to defy gravity. Skin was a cream color with a brown right eye, the left hidden behind a leaf headband, and the lower half of his face covered behind a black mask. "Hatake Kakashi," she said, half in awe, half in disbelief. "The copy-nin is my examiner." "Good, that means we know each other," Kakashi replied. Yujito, the Azure Cat. Kakashi Hatake, known across the elemental nations as the copy-nin, a renowned A-class shinobi who was said to have copied nearly 1,000 jutsu with his Sharingan eye. A veteran of the Third Shinobi World War, student to the Yondaime Hokage himself, and he was her examiner. There were rumors that he was one of the candidates for Hokage when the old man eventually retired. Yujito was forced from her thoughts when she saw that he was walking towards the center of the training field, and wordlessly followed. The clearing was large, and mostly just grassland with a single stream of crystal-clear water running through it. 3 stumps stood in the middle of the open space, looking worn from use. "Now, Hokage-sama has asked me to thoroughly test you in the shinobi arts," Kakashi explained, as he turned to face her, his one visible eye curled up. "So I must apologize." This confused her. Apologize for what? She could swear he was smiling behind his mask for this. Suddenly a pair of hands exploded from the earth beneath her feet, grabbing onto her ankles, and giving a strong pull. Yujito only had time to give a startled squeak before she was buried up to her neck in dirt. She looked around, before seeing the form of Kakashi explode with a pop into a mass of white smoke. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu," she cursed under her breath. "Correct," Kakashi replied, kneeling down in a crouch beside her, eyes closed in amusement. "Doton Shinjuzanshu no Jutsu." He rose to his feet, and sighed theatrically. "I was expecting a little more from you." Yujito smirked. "What, you thought I was just lying under that tree, in full view on purpose? Kakashi was about to ask her to elaborate, but then a pair of hands exploded from the ground where he stood, grabbing onto his ankles, and giving a strong pull. Before the Jonin knew it, he was up to his neck in dirt, watching, as Yujito's shed turned brown, and seemed to implode, melding perfectly with the dirt. Tsuchi Bunshin no Jutsu, Kakashi muttered under his breath, finding an incredible irony in the role reversal. Correct, Yujito replied, mimicking Kakashi's stance from a moment before, crouched, and eyes closed in a wide Cheshire cat's grin. Doton, Shinjuzanchu no. You know what Kakashi said before he exploded into a mass of white smoke with a pop. A voice was heard behind her. I think I might be starting to like you, Yujito-san. Smiling herself, Yujito rose to her feet, and turned to see Kakashi, standing a few feet away. The feeling is mutual, Kakashi-san, moving within a movement. The earth trap was to test if I had the foresight to see it coming, and if I was capable of performing a counter. She definitely has experience, and intelligence to boot, Kakashi thought to himself, watching the woman's every movement, no matter how subtle. The rumors of the Azure Cat appeared to have held a hint of truth. Okay, I doubt either one of us has the patience to sit through an entire day of examinations and tests. So I'll make this simple. A single examination which will test all of your abilities. As a shinobi, he reached into one of the satchels of his vest, pulling out a kunai knife. You have until midday to defeat me. Use every aspect within your arsenal, including weapons and jutsu. But the Hokage has decreed that you may not draw upon the power of your tenant. She looked at him questioningly, not surprised that her proctor knew her secret. Why not? He wants to see how strong you are without having to call upon the Nikomata. Kakashi explained. Here we believe that a shinobi's true strength comes from his or her own abilities, not those gained from a foreign power. Sarutobi-sama wants to see if your reputation was gained through your own powers or those of your tenant. She frowned, before nodding. That put her trump card out of play. Still, she wasn't defenseless. All right. If that's a stipulation of the test, then I accept it. His visible eye curled up, and she could have sworn he was smiling again. Then it happened. Kakashi threw the knife, the blade soaring towards her in a blur. Yujito's hand blurred in response, reaching into her kunai holster to grab said weapon, and throwing it on an intercept trajectory. The two knives met, clashing off each other, and spinning in opposite directions. She looked up to see Kakashi coming straight at her, hand grasping another kunai. She acted accordingly, drawing her katana from the small of her back, and bringing it up just in time to counter the stab. Both blades met, screeching off each other for a handful of heartbeats. The attack was a feint. Kakashi disengaged, and spun, bringing up his right leg for a strong kick to her abdomen. Yujito took it, being sent flying backwards, hand losing grip of her sword. She righted her fall, curling her body into a ball, and somersaulting to the ground, landing in a crouch. She rose, and spun around, falling into the black tiger fighting stance, and blocking a straight punch. Kakashi didn't relent for a moment, pressing his attack forward with a flurry of quick punches, swipes, and kicks which Yujito quickly and efficiently intercepted. Yet every time she tried to counter with a grapple, she found him just out of her reach. This man was familiar with her family's hand-to-hand style. She ducked a spinning heel kick, and coming down in a crouch lashed out with her right leg in a sweep. The Sharingan user jumped high in a chakra-propelled leap, easily evading her leg sweep, and both hands slipping into his vest satchels unleashed a handful of shuriken upon her. Using the spring of her bent knees, Yujito jumped back, watching the throwing stars embed themselves into the dirt before countering with her own flurry, but she added a twist. As her hand gripped three kunai, she exerted her chakra, coating the blades with a film of lightning before throwing them. The adage of the element increased their speed and killing power exponentially. Kakashi saw the attack coming, and managed to spin in midair, missing the blades by a few millimeters. He landed on his feet, skidding slightly to stop his spin, and keep his balance. He cast a look to where the knives went, only for his one visible eye to widen slightly. Two of the kunai embedded themselves in the ring in the dirt, while the other went straight through the bark of a tree. Lightning-coated kunai, huh? He mumbled before turning to face his impressive opponent. Lightning element is one of the hardest to manipulate. To be able to gather it, and hone it until it is as sharp as a blade takes some considerable chakra control. I spent most of my young life going through chakra control training. Yujito explained. I was born with Kage-level chakra reserves, yet next to no control. It took a trying training schedule, and years of practice to finally get it. Does Naruto have the same problem? She frowned at the question. Why do you want to know? Curiosity, he replied nonchalantly. I'm just wondering if being born with high-level chakra reserves is common among Jinchuriki. She hated that name, but found enough patience to calm herself, saying, as such. After a moment she relented. He has chakra reserves which dwarf mine, but I've been working with him on it, and he has greatly improved. I'm sure he has, Kakashi said, eyeing her for a moment before changing the subject. Your control of your ninjutsu is superb, and your taijutsu is excellent, though you seem to know only one style. My family style, Yujito answered, surprised he gleaned so much from such a short exchange. Why? No reason, the copy nin replied. It's just that most shinobi of Jonin level and Konohagakure tend to know the basics of at least 2 to 3 different fighting styles, to make their movements as unpredictable as possible. Yet you seem to only know one, and that would be a problem. It makes your movements predictable and easy to counter. Most people would have found this observation insulting, but Yujito nodded instead. So what do you recommend? Kakashi looked thoughtful for a moment. I would recommend that you stop holding back, Yujito-san. It is well known that the stipulation to know at least 3 different taijutsu arts is common practice for Jonin and Kumogakure. As well, the Nibi Jinchuriki sighed before changing her stance from her clan fighting style to the fighting art favored by the Yatsuki, an art that specialized in conjunction with Kenjutsu. She sprinted for her katana, grabbing the hilt and forcing it from the ground as she passed. Yujito turned to see Kakashi right on her, his masked face a few inches from her own, his own katana drawn and falling in a diagonal stroke. She brought her sword up, expertly intercepting her opponent's, and lashed out with her foot in a sweeping kick aimed for his side. Kakashi jumped away, the foot barely grazing him, yet it seemed to be just, as she expected, for Yujito to go on the offensive. She swung, and stabbed out with her katana fluently, like a dancer in motion, and watched, as Kakashi blocked, and parried her every stroke. But he was continuously backpedaling, barely keeping his balance. Yujito did not give him a chance to recover. She went in for a feint, and lashed out with her foot again, catching him in the abdomen, and sending him flying across the grassland, landing on his back, and back flipping to his feet. This was the Yatsuki Dragon Claw style Kenjutsu, a sword art which depended on quick strikes, slashes, and stabs, acrobatic movements, and quick strikes from knees and feet. With this style the practitioner always had to be in motion. She was not a master of the art, not by a long shot, but she was good enough to be considered a mid-level practitioner. Kakashi had just gathered his bearings when he saw Yujito come at him again, sword held ready. He spread his legs, brought up his own katana defensively, and waited for her to come to him. When she was within range he stabbed out, only to see her duck to the side, performing a chakra-enhanced somersault over his head, coming down behind him, and lashing out with her own sword. Kakashi was just able to spin around and block. He parried the blade, and stabbed out, aiming for her shoulder, only to see her dart to the right, and bring him on the defensive again. Kakashi was no slouch when it came to Kenjutsu, but he had to admit that with this woman he was outmatched. He needed to get some distance, and allow him to use some of his ninjutsu. Then he had it. Secretly he reached into his thigh holster, retrieving a few smoke bombs. As Yujito came running at him again he threw them onto the ground, causing them to explode, and fill the surrounding area with a thick cloud of smoke. Not good enough, Yujito said, as she rushed into the smoke, her hyperactive senses feeling a slight spike in chakra before picking up her opponent. He was rushing in from her left, and wide open. Yujito spun, stabbing out with her katana, expecting the copy nin to block, deflect or dodge. Instead her enhanced hearing picked up the sound of steel piercing flesh. She watched, as Kakashi threw himself onto her sword, eyes widening in horror, as he grimaced in pain, his mask dampening from blood dribbling from his mouth. Then his eyes curled up in an "I smile, got you." Yujito looked down, and scowled when she saw that instead of blood flowing from the wound it was water, and, as she looked up she watched, as the body turned transparent, and fell in on itself. She reeled back. He made a clone out of the water in the stream Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu. She turned to the stream to see Kakashi standing on the water's surface, going through a mass of seals, a lot of seals, meaning that he was about to release a very powerful jutsu. Nibi Jinchuriki made an intercept, but she was already too late. Finishing with the sign for the roster the copy nin called out the name of his attack, and the once serene river began to bubble Suetun, Suryuden no Jutsu. The water in the river seemed to explode, and a massive form became visible. A long neck made entirely of water, leading up to a frill of horns, and a rapidly forming long snout head, a mouth full of teeth opened, crimson eyes staring mercilessly at her. The water dragon threw its head back, and roared before soaring forward on a collision course with her. In response Yujito sheathed her blade, and blurred through a set of hand seals, all the while the long creature of condensed water came ever closer, maw open to swallow her whole. Just in time she finished her seals, and kneeling to the ground slammed her hands into the earth, shouting out the incantation for the Jutsu Doton, Doryahiki. The earth before her began to crack, and heave, and within moments a massive wall of rock and dirt shot out of the ground before her, nearly 12 meters high, and hardened further by her own chakra. Barely a second after the wall was erected, the water dragon smashed head-on into it with an incredible explosion, the pressure from the water ninjutsu making the wall crack, and its edges snap off. As soon as it started, it stopped, and Yujito breathed a sigh of relief. Her relief was short-lived, as Sharingan Kakashi used the water jutsu to his advantage, and used distraction to outmaneuver her defenses. She spun around to see him rushing towards her at high speed, and with a quickness born from years of experience. Yujito brought her hands together, forming the signs for the boar and dragon. She blocked his downward fist, and came forward with a palm, densely infused with lightning-released chakra. Muhi. Just as she was about to connect, she looked into his eyes, only to see that his headband was moved up to his forehead, revealing his other eye. A crimson iris with 3 small black tomo markings which seemed to spin around the pupil of their own accord. Yujito looked into his left eye, her almond orbs unable to leave it, as if hypnotized. She was hypnotized. Something solid connected with her abdomen, sending her flying back, and hitting the ground hard. That was the Sharingan, a 3-tomo Sharingan, Yujito thought, before cursing under her breath. Shit! A circle of leaves flew around her, as if she was caught in a tornado with her in the eye. As suddenly as the leaves circled, they fell away, leaving her standing in the landscape she remembered standing on before. Yujito looked around with a frown, eyes sharp, scanning for anything out of the ordinary. Mom! She turned around, gasping at what she saw. Lying on the ground, his eyes open, and blank to the world around him, was Naruto. His body was covered in blood, mating his hair and skin crimson. Yujito staggered a step back, breath coming and going in shrill, shallow gasps. Then she tightly shut her eyes, violently shaking her head from side to side. This is not real, she hissed through her teeth, but the image was cemented in her mind's eye. This is a genjutsu. This is not real. Snapping her eyes open, she brought her hands together in the sign of the ram, and gathering her chakra into a condensed ball, unleashed it upon the world. Yelling Kai! The vision before her ruptured, like she was looking through a pane of glass, as the genjutsu was forced to dispel. The image cracked, spiderweb-like markings creeping along her vision. Then with a resounding crash the reflection shattered into thousands of shards. Blackness reigned, followed by the landscape slowly coming back into focus. With a chilling calmness, Yujito reeled her fist back, blocking a straight punch aimed to her face, and staring into Kakashi's slightly surprised gaze, brought her fist forward, connecting with his right cheek, and sending him flying back. Word of the wise, she growled, as he hit the earth hard, and struggled to his feet. Don't mess with the cat and her kitten. Shaking his head to stop it from spinning, Kakashi muttered, bad dream? Yuzuki Yuga was one of the most trustworthy of the Hokage's ANBU, recruited shortly after gaining the rank of Jonin at 17, nearly a year ago. She had been one of 8 ANBU selected by the Hokage to guard and protect one Uzumaki Naruto, and his protector. Because of this, she and her comrades had been briefed on everything by Hiruzen. Yugao had been only 10 years old, still an academy student, when the Kyuubi attacked the village. Because of this, she was one of the first to be evacuated to the shelters in the Hokage Mountains. She was an orphan, her mother and father being casualties during the Third Great Shinobi World War some 5 years earlier. She, like everyone else her age, had been kept in the dark about the true events of the battle, and Yugao only found out about it when she was accepted into the ANBU Corps. Even after learning the truth, she held no real hatred or malice towards the boy. To her it sounded more like Naruto was the victim in the whole mess, forced to become the prison for that unholy monster. Yugao didn't hate him. She pitied him for the enormous burden forced on his shoulders. She held no hatred for him, but she held plenty of annoyance for her current assignment. Although it was one of the core jobs of an ANBU to survey, she did not like being turned into a stalker, hidden on a branch of the tree across the street from their apartment. Her knees ached from being in the same position for the last 5 hours, and she desperately craved that her relief would soon arrive. At first she didn't even know why she was needed, although the Kumo woman had left the apartment at 7:30, followed by Yugeo's partner. To begin her entrance examinations, the boy still had Jiraiya, the Gama Sennin himself, protecting him. Though she had a good look at the main window, and saw him rolled up in a sleeping bag like a cocoon on the sofa, snoring loudly, she began to change her opinion. Her lingering doubt in the Sannin's protection skyrocketed when she saw Naruto exit the apartment, and begin to shoot his head left and right, as if looking for something. Then he jogged across the street to within a few meters of her tree. She looked down, preparing to follow him if he continued on. He walked up to the trunk, and looked up. Yugao could have sworn he was looking straight at her. Maybe it was her imagination. ANBU-san. It wasn't her imagination. Her head snapped down, and although her cat mask hid it, her eyes were wide open, and her mouth went slack in surprise. How could a child, maybe 8 years old, be able to see her from such a distance? She shook herself out of her stupefied state, and looked down again to see him walking up the trunk of the tree. It took him 5 seconds to scale the tree, and make it to her branch, which he scaled over, and fell into a crouch beside her. Naruto then looked right at her, and grinned widely, almost sheepishly. Yo. All that could have been seen of her surprise was her eyes, as wide as saucers. You know tree walking? Now he did look sheepish, scratching the back of his head. Yeah, it was one of the first things I was taught. The trainer said that I was a hopeless case, but Mom proved otherwise. Hyuga nodded dumbly, before shaking her head to overcome her surprise. Naruto meanwhile sat on the branch beside her, legs dangling over the edge. So you're one of the people Gigi sent to protect me? She nodded, finally gaining some control of her motor functions. Can't be too comfortable out here for several hours, and San? Besides herself she sighed, wishing for a nice hot cup of herbal green tea, and a comfortable chair. Naruto seemed to read her mind, because he got up to his feet, and grabbed her left hand, giving it a light tug. Come on. Hyuga just stared at him for a moment, watching, as he smiled, not the sheepish grin from earlier, but a simple, disarming smile. You're supposed to protect me, right? Might be easier if you're in the same building as me, and not sitting in this tree. Before the ANBU agent knew it, she had been forced to jump from the branch to the concrete pavement, and almost dragged across the street by an energetic 8-year-old. Before she knew it, he had guided her into the lobby, down the corridors, up the stairs, and into his apartment, before setting her on a nice, comfortable chair while he went to the en-suite kitchen. After spending nearly 3 hours crouching in a tree, Hyuga couldn't believe how content she was feeling, and when Naruto brought her a mug of tea, herbal green no less, she felt like she was in nirvana. They both thought Jiraiya was asleep. They couldn't have been more wrong. An eye squinted open, looking at the ANBU agent just as Naruto handed her a cup of herb tea, and she removed her mask. 8 years old, and already bringing women home. I don't know whether I should be proud or jealous. Kakashi's form was a blur, effortlessly flying from one tree branch to another in an attempt to keep up with his examinee. After 20 minutes of intense combat, including impressive use of taijutsu, ninjutsu, and genjutsu, his opponent had retreated into the surrounding forest. Whether this withdrawal was because of exhaustion or a backup plan, Kakashi didn't know, but he guessed it was the latter. After fighting with this woman, he came to the conclusion that, even without the Nikomata, she was a worthy opponent on the battlefield. She was skilled in a few types of taijutsu, and by extension skilled in kenjutsu, proving that the katana she owned was there for more than show. Her ninjutsu arsenal, although formidable, were mostly designed for defense, with a few mid-range attacks, mostly those chakra-coated kunai, and paralysis techniques thrown in, most likely made to be used in conjunction with her symbiotes, something Kakashi hoped Sandaime would be able to correct. She needed to learn some offensive techniques if she was to survive long, and there were shinobi out there powerful enough to subdue a Jinchuriki who depended on their prisoner too heavily. Her weakness mostly lay in genjutsu, although she was able to dispel most with her impressive release ability. He guessed she was subconsciously using her prisoner to create such a powerful disrupting shockwave of chakra, but was willing to let it slide. She didn't know any illusionary techniques suited for a battlefield. Against a seasoned Uchiha with a high-level Sharingan, she would definitely have trouble. You've been taught to rely on your Biju too much, Kakashi thought, as he stormed through the forest. That can be dangerous, especially if you can't fully control it. Yujito watched, as Kakashi continued on his course, and smiled, as he came into position. She had him. She threw the kunai held in her hand, before moving on, knowing that it would hit its target. Did he honestly think I spent 2.5 hours just waiting? The thrown kunai's aim was perfect, and cut through a tightly tied cord of rope, releasing her trap. A huge log, held in midair by rope, flew at Kakashi like a battering ram, ready to strike. But Kakashi saw it, and his seasoned mind already thought of a way around it. He gripped the top of the log, and using his momentum pushed himself on top of it before jumping off it. He somersaulted in midair, hitting the ground, and turning in time to see the log smash into a thick tree trunk, shattering the trap, and chipping bark. Yujito had made it to her second trap, and drawing her sword walked along a line of 3 strands of rope, each holding back a catapult of a tree branch, each holding a supply of rocks, twigs, and the occasional kunai or shuriken. As she walked, she cut the cords with her sword, releasing the artillery barrage upon her proctor. Kakashi saw shadows on the ground, and looked up to see the barrage of rock, wood, and metal fall upon him from above. His first thought was along the lines of clever, being able to interpret where he would land after dodging her first trap. Then he exploded into motion, flying back in a mass of backflips to dodge the hordes of rock, and wood slamming into the ground just in front of him. He thought he was safe when he reached a fallen trunk, but a small series of dull thuds proved otherwise. Looking over his cover, the copy Nin saw a trio of kunai embedded in the bark, a small slip of paper attached to one, lighting, and burning away like a fuss. Paper bomb. He thought before jumping back with a chakra-enhanced leap, watching as the log he had taken cover behind exploded, sending crimson flame and timber debris flying in every direction. He hit the ground, skidded to a halt, and took cover behind a heavy tree, hearing the pieces of wood smack off the trunk. He breathed a sigh of relief, which held when he felt the cold steel of a katana against his neck. Opening his eyes, Kakashi looked at the long blade, then felt hot air against his left ear and cheek, as Yujito spoke, obviously pleased with herself. It's over. You're right about that, he said with a smile, before disappearing with a pop and a mass of smoke. Yujito staggered forward, growling a curse under her breath before she felt the cold steel of a kunai pressed against her neck. Kakashi leaned forward, and even with the mask his own breath warmed her left ear and cheek. Got you, she growled, before releasing a groan of pure disappointment in herself, as she dropped her katana. No earth clones this time. He had the real one by the throat, meaning that he had won their little duel. With a sigh he released his grip, and sheathed his kunai knife, waiting, as she turned around, picking up her katana, and sheathing it. Not bad. Your skill level without the nibi is enough for Jonin, Kakashi explained, reaching up with his hand to position his headband back over his Sharingan. Congratulations, you pass. Yujito blinked. Thanks. Now that the man has finished, I have a report to make to the Hokage. Make sure both you and Naruto are at his office at 3 in the afternoon. He vanishes in a swirl of wind, and leaves, the village's own patented version of the Shunshin no Jutsu. The blonde blinked at the empty space just as the leaves once more began to settle, and after a moment she brought her hands together in the same set of hand signs, vanishing with a static of electricity, initiating the Kumo version of the Shunshin no Jutsu. To say that Yujito was surprised with this situation was an understatement. When she entered the apartment she saw that Naruto and Jiraiya weren't the only occupants. Sitting on one of the plush sofas was a young, fairly pretty ANBU agent, sipping a cup of herbal tea, and looking like she was in nirvana. Not that the Nibi Jinchuriki could blame the girl, she had been crouched in a tree for 3 hours before she left. One thing she knew very well about her charge was that he had a very warm and caring nature. Sure, he enjoyed playing the occasional prank, but those were mainly harmless, if a little aggravating at times. To this day she still tried to find out when he had the time to replace the contents of her shampoo bottle with black hair dye. It was the first and last prank he had ever pulled on her, if the threat of dissection by katana was to be believed. Oh hi mom, Naruto greeted warmly from the kitchen. Welcome home. I'm home, Yujito replied with a smile, continuing their usual greeting when she returned from a mission. So how did your examination go? I think it went well, though we'll have to wait and see, she replied, flexing her shoulder muscles, finding them still a little stiff. That Kakashi-san doesn't pull his punches. You got Kakashi Hatake? The ANBU asked from the couch. Yujito looked the woman up and down, something Naruto noticed. It's okay mom, this is Yuzuki Yugao. She's one of the ANBU GG assigned to watch us, so she's cool. The older blonde sometimes wondered about his incredible ability to trust people. She knew he saw the elderly Hokage as something like a grandfather. When they still lived in Kumo, he used to tell her about how the Sandaime would come to visit and talk to him, make sure he was looked after, and on a few occasions protected him from people who wished him harm. Besides her adopted son's beliefs, though she wasn't so sure, in her experience Shinobi only got as old as he did by outliving his rivals. That said, she turned back to the NBU and bowed politely. Good morning, she responded with a warm smile. Same to you. Yujito peered over the other couch to see Jiraiya, still held up in his sleeping bag like it was a giant cocoon. How long has he pretended to be asleep? Since Naruto dragged me into the apartment, Yugao responded idly, taking another sip of her tea, and sighing happily. About 10 minutes after you left. The sage creaked open and you caught on. I'm impressed. The older blonde sighed, before turning to her little brother/son. How's the fridge? The 8-year-old opened the door to show the barren interior on empty. Alright, Yujito said, come on, let's take care of this before our meeting with the Hokage. Do you need some help? Yugao asked. The older blonde thought about it for a moment, then shrugged. Come on then, the more the merrier. The shopping had passed by rather event-free, and was considerably easier when an ANBU agent who knew the market district like the back of her hand was showing you the best deals and where to buy the more high-quality merchandise. Yugao was very helpful, and seemed to take an immediate liking to Naruto, and vice versa. The 8-year-old cub had even accidentally called her Nei-san once or twice. In typical fashion, Naruto wanted to get nothing but instant ramen, something that both women immediately said no to, only allowing him to buy 3 cups of his favorite flavors before moving on to look for other groceries. Yujito understood his fixation. Ramen was cheap and easy to cook, and when she listened to his stories of this village, he had mentioned this little ramen stand whose owners had given him free food when he was hungry. But she refused to allow him to eat nothing but ramen at every meal. It was just not healthy. Yujito was addicted to fish, yet she didn't have it at every meal. The two women had bought a mass of fresh vegetables, fruit, meat, rice, fish, a variety of healthy fruit juice drinks, and, to Yugeo's surprise, almost a gallon of low-fat milk. They had to go back to unload their bags before going out on another run. But while they were shopping, and Naruto was pouting over only getting 3 cups of ramen, Yujito and her watcher had got a friendly banter going. Yugao asking her about what life in Kumogakure was like, and Yujito doing likewise. They talked about the missions they went through, how they each became ANBU of their own respective, or in her case former, villages. By the time they finished shopping, picked up Jiraiya, and were heading to the Hokage's palace, the two women were acting like old friends. Yugao even went as far as mentioning this boy called Hate she liked, to which Yujito grinned, and started teasing. To anyone who looked, it was just 2 young women chatting, with a kid, and an old man in tow. But as things calmed down, and they entered the palace, Yujito found her experience in this village strange. In Kumogakure, newcomers were put under surveillance by at least a full squad of elite ANBU, not just 1 or 2. Newcomers wouldn't have been allowed to roam around as freely as she had been, but here she had been able to move freely to the training ground and go out shopping, albeit with an ANBU agent. To her, security in this village seemed pretty lax, and she wondered if the 20-odd years of relative peace had made the strongest of the 5 great shinobi villages soft. The two arrived at the Hokage's office right on time, with both Jiraiya and Yugao acting as escorts. As usual, the old man was behind his desk, looking up at them with a pleasant and warm smile before beckoning them to enter. Naruto jumped onto one of the chairs and sat down cross-legged. Yujito, in a more reserved manner, sat down and waited. "It is done," Hiruzen said, bringing forward a small binder of paper and a pen. "You were lucky you arrived a month into the academy year. Just sign here, as Naruto's guardian, and he will join the classes on Monday week." Yujito nodded, picking up the pen, and signing her name on the front form. Swiftly she looked through the small assortment of papers, reading the odd important detail before signing her signature. It seemed that no matter what village you were in, there was always a large amount of paperwork. She finished quickly, and handed the folder back to Sarutobi, who took it with a smile. Good. Now let us discuss the details of your prohibition period. Usually when a newcomer such as yourself seeks sanctuary in this village, he, or in your case she, has to go through a prohibition period of roughly 3 months depending on the current state of affairs. During this time you will be shadowed by a select group of ANBU to make sure you're not an enemy spy or instigator. Is that understandable? Yujito nodded her understanding, while Naruto looked slightly confused, but chose not to speak up about it. This prohibition period was used in all the shinobi villages, and depending on the village's opinion of foreigners, the time period could be anything from a month to 3 years. Konoha was considered one of the more relaxed villages. "Excellent," Hiruzen replied. "Now I don't want to keep you." That appeared to be their cue to leave. Both Yujito and Naruto rose. The elder bowed, but the younger looked bored out of his mind, signifying that it was definitely time to go. Both turned, and were about to leave, when they heard a commotion taking place outside the office. A man's voice could be heard just outside the doors, arguing with the receptionist, and neither blonde noticed Jiraiya nor the Hokage's eyes widened in near panic. The door slammed open to reveal a middle-aged man with dark eyes, and shoulder-length black hair, his fringe parted. Skin was tanned with slight creases of age under his eyes, and the sides of his mouth. Fugaku Uchiha looked at Yujito in mild confusion, before noticing a head of gravity-defying blonde locks. He looked down at the small 8-year-old blonde, and realization hit his features. Naruto saw the middle-aged man's eyes change, the irises turning crimson with 3 black curved teardrop-like symbols appearing around the pupil. Fugaku stared down at the blonde with a cold, hate-filled glare. "You!" Merciless eyes the color of blood bore down upon his azure. The small black tomos spinning clockwise across the scara, so fast they were just a blur of motion to him. Naruto was scared. He had never felt such a sense of foreboding descend upon him. Even the cold gazes he remembered were nothing compared to this. Before these eyes he felt that his heart could stop. A hand gripped his shoulder, and moved him back, and to the side, placing him behind his mom's left leg, taking his gaze away from the murderous Sharingan eyes which were staring straight at him. His protector's voice filtered through his mind, soft yet commanding. "Stay behind me." Confident Naruto was safely behind her, Yujito leveled her pointed gaze upon the man who dared cast such a threatening glare upon him. Her own eyes began to glow with a slight malevolent cerulean light, as she stared into the eyes of one of the most powerful Dijitsu in history. Time seemed to stop. No one moved, not the Hokage or Jiraiya, nor herself or the Uchiha, not even Naruto. Jiraiya-sama, Yujito said with a slight impatience. Remember when you said I can rip anyone who threatens him limb from limb? You might want to tell him to stop, or that is exactly what I will do. The Sharingan was a powerful Kekei Kenkai, one of the most powerful in the elemental nations, but she was a Jinchuriki to a Biju, and that in her mind evened the odds considerably. The Uchiha scoffed. Step aside, woman. What can you do against me? Come at me, and find out, she replied heatedly. Her eyes took on a darker shade of blue, replacing her usual almond. I promise it will be an experience you will never forget. A hand gripped Yujito's shoulder, and the blonde turned her head to set a hard glare upon Jiraiya. The Toad Sage spoke, but his eyes were set on the Uchiha clan head. You two are done for the day, go on home. The elder blonde looked like a retort was on the edge of her tongue, but she stopped herself when he set his own dark eyes upon her. The look he gave was basically screaming that he would deal with it. So Yujito grit her teeth, exercising some hard-fought restraint before hooking an arm around Naruto's shoulder to guide him out, sending a hard glare Fugaku's way. As the double doors closed behind them, Jiraiya sent a hard glare at Fugaku Uchiha, which was returned with equal intensity. Whether you like it or not, the kid is back, and it won't be like last time. Is that a fact? The Uchiha clan head replied mockingly. And what can you do about it? Quite a bit actually, Jiraiya replied. For instance, the laws protecting him are still in place, and I have given his guardian permission to kill anyone who is a threat to him, and she is very good at her job. I see, Fugaku replied, pushing past him to set his gaze upon the Hokage. But isn't he still legally an orphan? Meaning that until he officially becomes a shinobi he is still under the legislation of the Civilian Council. Usually yes, Sarutobi agreed, speaking for the first time, but that has been rectified. Explain. You see, the one you were having a staring contest with is Ni Yujito, a former Jonin ANBU captain of Kumogakure, an A-rank kunoichi. She was one of their best. Hiruzen explained in his usual sagely voice. She was made Naruto's guardian when he was kidnapped, and over time the two formed a strong bond. She fled Kumo with him when the council overruled the Refuge about a certain training regime they were going to put him through, and came here looking for amnesty, he said. Fugaku with a harsh glare. One of her conditions was that she be allowed to adopt Naruto, and by the signatures of these forms it is official. Jiraiya allowed a smug smirk to cross his features, meaning that he is no longer an orphan, and so is no longer under the jurisdiction of the Civilian Council. Thank you, Jiraiya, the Hokage said with a smirk. I will be bringing this forward to the council. You are welcome to do so, the Sandaime intoned, but I doubt you'll get anywhere, what with your condescending attitude, as of late. And I know for a fact that I have the support of the Yamanaka, Nara, Akimichi, and Inuzuka clans. Fugaku grit his teeth. He could go to the Civilian Council, but their power was all legislative. They had no real power against the Hokage or the Council of Fire. Finally he shook his head, trying to form several new contingencies to the old problem he thought had gone away. Are there any other reasons why you are in my office, Fugaku-san? Yes, Hokage-sama, he ground out. No one in the room noticed the little Kikaichu insect perched on the far side of the office windowsill, listening in to the entire conversation. The man sat quietly upon a tatami mat, head bowed, legs crossed, and hands resting on his knees. The only sounds which could be heard in the underground chamber was the water falling from a crack along the pipeline, falling in small drips exactly every 2 seconds. He was an interesting individual, dressed in a black high-collar jacket and pants, a red sash tied to his waist, and a gas-like mask covering the top half of his head. He did not wear a jonin vest of Konoha, but one could tell by his body language that he was of that level. His very pose screamed that he was or once was a member of the ANBU Corps. The floating Kikaichu insect went by seemingly unnoticed, falling from the ceiling high above, and landing silently on his shoulder. His hand flew up with blurring speed, catching the insect, and bringing it close to his ear. For a couple of moments there was silence, then the man nodded, and opened his hand, allowing the little creature to fly away. Well, he looked across at the man sitting opposite him, also on a tatami mat, sipping a cup of herbal green tea. It is, as you thought, Danzo-sama. Uchiha Fugaku has learned of the return of Uzumaki Naruto, but there is more. Danzo remained silent, waiting for his subordinate to continue. Aburame Torian was one of the eldest members of Root, and was also considered one of the organization's most highly ranked shinobi. A member of the infamous Aburame clan, he was a master in the arts of controlling insects, and even played host to a rare breed of deadly Kikaichu insects within his own body. It appears that the Uchiha clan is backing down from the confrontation. The information gave Danzo pause for a moment, before he scoffed lightly. It is a ploy. The Uchiha are too arrogant to back down unless they're planning to stab Hiruzen when his back is turned. Hokage-sama appears to think that way, as well. Danzo-sama, the Aburame replied in the monotone common among his clan. But he is preparing to bring down the alert level from 5 to 3. Shimura Danzo sat there for a moment, as if deep in thought, then with a heavy sigh he rose from his place, turned, and began to walk out of the chamber. Thank you, Torian. You are dismissed. Hi, Danzo-sama. Naruto peered studiously over the textbook, his eyes darting left and right, as he read the information from the pages, and tried to commit it to memory. The book was given to him by Ero-sennin, who told him that he needed to read through the first 6 chapters before he started the academy next week. Apparently he had missed out on the first month of the academy, and needed to catch up. The textbook, named A Basic Guide to the Shinobi Arts, was apparently mandatory for all students in the first year, and explained the duties and responsibilities of being a shinobi, as well as the hierarchy of the village, detailed explanations of the ranks from genin to kage, and the most basic terms of the human chakra system. Without help, an 8-year-old child wouldn't be able to get his head around so much information, much less in a week. Luckily he had a tutor who was considered a jonin-level shinobi, and who knew these terms and topics like the back of her hand. Yujito was sitting on the chair next to him, a small smile gracing her features every time he told her there was something he didn't understand. That kind of sucks, the young blonde muttered. Genin only gets D-rank missions. Yujito smirked. D-rank, and the occasional C-rank when you start proving yourself. You see, Naruto, a genin is considered the lowest rank within a shinobi army, usually those fresh out of the academy. So to get you started they give you simple low-level missions. But why? Well, the elder blonde started mostly to see if you can work together with your teammates, but also to earn money for yourselves and your village. Although the higher rank missions pay more, it is the simple D ranks that make up the majority of village earnings in peacetime. Naruto looked up at her questioningly. Did you have to do this, Mom? Her face fell for a moment, a sad smile. No. I became a genin when I was about your age. The Third Shinobi World War was in full swing, and I was sent to the front line. She shivered slightly at the memories of what she had seen, and what she had been forced to do to survive, but shook it off. Let's just say that D-ranks become less of a priority when there is a world war going on. Oh, Naruto replied, seeing the pain in her eyes, and deciding to change the topic. He once again peered over the book, looking through the passages. They went on at that for another half hour, then Jiraiya came in, saw them studying his book, and grinned. Well, got the brat started already, huh? The sooner he starts the sooner he learns, Yujito replied absently. Hey Ero-sennin, I am not a brat, Naruto called out indignantly. I tell you what, the middle-aged man replied with a smirk. You stop calling me Ero-sennin, and I stop calling you brat, deal? Not a chance. His remark caused Yujito to smirk. Then I keep calling you brat, Jiraiya answered, moving into his kitchen. Naruto harumphed, but was quickly moving back to study the textbook. After a moment of silence, Yujito decided to leave him to it, and rising to her feet followed the toad Sannin out to the kitchen. Once she was there, she saw the elder shinobi, leaning against the far line of cupboards, arms folded, and eyes serious. So what happened after I left, she asked, as casually as she could, opening the fridge, and grabbing a bottle of milk. The cat's out of the bag. Funny guy, Yujito replied dryly, before her own expression became serious. Who was that man? I could tell he was an Uchiha by the Sharingan eyes, but why did he threaten Naruto like that? His name is Fugaku Uchiha, Jiraiya answered, noticing her tense up slightly at the name. Head of the Uchiha clan, and the commander-in-chief of the Konoha military police. Great, Yujito muttered, absently taking off the cap, and downing half of the bottle. Relaxing, Jiraiya smirked. There's very little he can do to Naruto. He doesn't have any clout with the Council of Fire, and the old man has already gained assurances that at least 4 of the major clans will side with him. It's not the Shinobi Council I'm worried about, Yujito replied, downing the rest of the bottle, and tossing it over her shoulder into the bin. It's the Civilian Council. What has Naruto told you? Jiraiya asked seriously. Enough to make me want to find the heads of the orphanage, and rip their throats out, the blonde replied. You won't have to do that, the Sannin replied, nudging past her to the fridge, and retrieving a small bottle of sake. Throwing another to her, the old man has already sent a team of ANBU to escort them to a Bikikun. She smirked. Can I sit in on the interrogation? Don't forget you've just started probation, Jiraiya reminded absently, opening the bottle with his teeth, and spitting the cork into the bin, and they'll probably be wetting themselves before too long. Don't know about you, but that would be something I wouldn't want to smell. Good point, the former Kumo Jonin replied, opening her sake bottle, and taking a sip. So should I be worried about Fugaku? Nah, the elder replied. Fugaku may see Naruto as a fox in human clothing, but he's not stupid enough to sanction an assassination attempt. At least not with me, and the old man's ANBU present. Why does he hate Naruto so much? Jiraiya looked her in the eyes, and then sighed. He lost his parents to the fox, as well as his younger sister Kasumi. He was holding her hand when she died. From what I heard, she was always his conscience. Oh, looking at it from his point of view, I can't really blame him for hating what Kyubi, Jiraiya said slowly. But this is different. Naruto is an innocent third party of the entire thing. He is so blinded by his own grief that he doesn't see Naruto as the jailer. He just sees the fox that crushed his sister underfoot. I suppose I understand where he's coming from. You don't mean? Of course not, Yujito replied tightly, insulted that he would ever consider that she would ever side with that man. Losing a loved one is a hard thing to get over, but not a good enough excuse to take the life of a child. Naruto is not the Kyuubi. Same way, as I'm not the Nibi. Anyone who doesn't understand that is a fool. Jiraiya nodded his head, a small smile forming on his lips. Whether Naruto knew it or not, he had found someone who cared for him, and was willing to sacrifice anything to protect him. Well, you can count on my support, he said with a genuine smile, giving her the thumbs up welcome to Konoha. She smiled a little in response. Thank you. They entered the living room a few minutes later to find that Naruto had fallen asleep, his face against the open pages of his textbook. With a gentle smile, she lifted him up in her arms, and walked into his bedroom, depositing him in his bed, and pulling the covers over his still form. She saw Jiraiya lying on the couch, as she exited the bedroom, smirking. What? Not a thing, he replied, rising from his resting place to look at her. Not a thing at all. You go on to bed. I think I'll stay up for a little while longer. Yujito frowned at him for a handful of heartbeats, before shrugging, and walking into her own bedroom, closing the door behind her. He had just settled down when he felt a tingling feeling from his upper right arm. Frowning, he pulled up the sleeve of his red button shirt to reveal an oak tree tattoo. The individual branches each represented one of the seals he had placed around his apartment. They were all black, except the lowest right branch, which was flashing red. Someone had set off the seal. He stood, bit his finger, and made a few hand signs, slamming his hand to the floor with a whisper. Kuchiyos no Jutsu, a small black circle inscribed with runes, appeared for a moment before an explosion of white smoke encompassed the room. When it cleared, Jiraiya stood, staring at a frog half his size, a katana strapped to his back. Watch them, he ordered. I have a few intruders to take care of. Hi! The silence of the night was shattered, as 5 individuals landed on the roof with a mass of taps. All looked around, scouring the area for any sign of pursuit. Satisfied, they huddled together in a crouch. 4 of them were career genin, normal foot soldiers of Konoha's impressive ninja army. The 5th individual wore the flak jacket of a chunin. He looked at each of his comrades, gaining nods from them all. No ANBU? None. One, a tubby man with his hide hung from his neck, stated they mustn't have gotten the roster ready yet. Good. The chunin looked at his unit of shinobi. Prepare yourselves, for tonight is the night we kill that damned Kyuubi no Yoko once and for all. They all nodded, determined to get the job done. I have waited 8 years for this. One of them, a middle-aged man with graying hair, growled. Ever since that monster killed my son, I have waited for this. My daughter will be avenged tonight, another stated. Our opponent is Jiraiya-sama, though, a sinewy bald man informed them. What about that Kumo shinobi we were told to watch out for? They're bound to be asleep. The chunin waved. Off we get in quick, kill quick, and leave quick. Just then an explosion of smoke filled the roof, forcing the startled ninja to jump away to the adjacent rooftops. A silhouette could just be made out. A bulky man with long hair stood tall and proud, his arms folded. Do you want to know the reason there aren't any ANBU protecting the boy? The man asked. The smoke cleared to reveal the legendary Sannin himself, his expression one of deadly seriousness. Because I'm here. Now, he asked calmly, who of you wishes to die first? The 2 genin on the next rooftop threw a handful of shuriken and kunai at the Sannin, hoping to take him out of the fight quickly. They riddled him, only to see his body explode in a puff of white smoke, replaced by a thick log. Substitution, one yelled before a shadow fell on them. Looking up, they saw the toad sage descend upon them like a bird of prey. His fist reeled back for a punch. As he landed, his hand slammed into the face of the tubby ninja, his left cheekbone shattering under the force of the impact. For a moment nothing happened, then the power behind the blow was released, and the genin flew several feet back, landing hard on the roof edge. The other drew a kunai, and in a panic tried to stab him, but the sage ducked the blade, and brought his fist up for a perfect uppercut to the chin. The man flew back like a ragdoll. Another wave of shuriken was thrown at him, this time from the 2 other genin who had landed on the street below. Jiraiya jumped from his perch, the shuriken embedding the area where he once stood, making hand signs with such speed that it was a blur to the low-level ninja on the ground. Doton, Yomi Numa. He slammed his hands into the road, and without warning the ground at their feet changed, turning from tough hard concrete to a swampy mud. Before they realized that the ninja's own weight was used against them, and they found themselves sunk to their knees. Best not to move, the sage instructed. The more you struggle, the deeper you'll sink. He was forced to jump to the side, narrowly avoiding the kunai embedded in the concrete. Attached to the ring at the end of its handle was a small sealed slip of paper, which lit up and started burning like a fuse. A paper bomb. The bomb exploded, its aftershocks sending Jiraiya barreling into a lamppost. The post cracked under his weight, and the fire lamp hanging from the top fell to the ground in a small explosion of flame. The Chunin appeared, face set in a snarl, as he approached the downed form of Jiraiya. Great and legendary Sannin, the man mocked, taking off his bandana to reveal a head of spiked brown hair. What have you done, Kuru? One of the trapped ninja asked in shock. I got rid of an obstacle, the Chunin shrugged. A kunai flew into his hand, and now I'm going to remove it permanently. By Kami, do you know who that is? Doesn't matter, Kuru replied. All that matters is that we killed the Kyuubi. He rolled the unconscious Sannin over, and held his kunai to the man's neck. Sayonara. He slashed his throat, and watched, as the body vanished in a puff of smoke. He stumbled back with a yelp. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Yeah, a voice said from behind him, you shouldn't have done that. He turned to be met with a swirling ball of pure blue chakra impacting against his sternum. The sage held it in one hand, a grim smile on his face, as the Rasengan ripped through the Chunin like a knife through warm butter. The ball seemed to explode, the force sending Kuru spinning through the air, slamming into a far wall with a bone-crushing thud. The man coughed and hacked as Jiraiya approached, spitting out a gob of blood as he came up on his hands and knees. Ruthlessly, a hand grabbed his collar, hauled him to his feet, and slammed him hard against the wall he just put a crater through. Now you're going to give me some answers, the spy master said in an emotionless tone. Who sent you? Were you acting alone or with help? Why did the man rasp? Why are you protecting that monster? He is not a monster, the older man replied. He is the host to a monster. Same difference, the man croaked, then cried out, as he was slammed against the wall again. No, it's not. Jiraiya spat vehemently. There's as much difference as a jailer and a criminal. The kid was forced to bear the curse of sealing up that monster to protect this village. He was the sacrifice. He is the hero, the hero repeated mockingly. Yes, the hero, Sannin replied. Would you blame the jailer for the actions of the criminal? Then you are the monster. It makes no difference, Kuru coughed. We will not be the last, there will be others. Sooner or later the monster will die. Well, the old man replied, free hand creating another Rasengan. You won't be here to see it. He slammed the swirling chakra ball into the man's abdomen. A kill shot this time. Kuru screamed his last scream, and his body went limp. Calmly, Jiraiya pulled his bloody hand from the hole he made in the ninja's chest. Sayonara. Go to whatever hell awaits, child murderers. He dropped the body like rubbish he found on the street, and turned to the two ninja trapped in his swamp technique. It was then, with a blur of motion, that a full tactical squad of ANBU appeared at the scene, their animal masks hiding their faces. A man with a dog mask came forward. You've made quite a mess, Jiraiya-sama. Kakashi the Sannin greeted. Long time no see, you've grown a few inches. Well, what do you expect, the ANBU asked lightly, taking off his mask. It has been 8 years since you visited this village. True, we'll be taking them from here, Jiraiya-sama. I take it they will be punished. The penalty for such a crime is capital punishment. Execution by hanging, Kakashi replied, ignoring the anguished howls from the genin. How can you do this? One screamed. How can you protect that thing? My daughter died because of that monster. Shut up, Kakashi growled, his killing intent radiating from him in waves. You weren't going to kill a monster. You were going to kill an 8-year-old boy who had been forced to be the catalyst to seal that demon away. I would kill you here, and now if the Hokage decreed it. I'm sorry for the loss of your daughter, Jiraiya spoke up, but you are not killing the demon. You were just going to hurt an innocent child, and for that crime there is no reprieve. The man seemed quiet, and then he chuckled weakly. It makes no difference. You were so busy with us that you never thought that we had a sixth person. To their surprise, Jiraiya smirked. You seem to forget that I have backup. Who? The toad summon. Oh no, Jiraiya replied with a shake of his head. Someone much worse. Before the man could ask why, there was a crash. Something heavy was sent flying through glass, and landed hard on the floor with a bone-crushing crack. Jiraiya himself flinched when he heard the sound of the man colliding with the ground from a drop of at least 3 stories. The boy's guardian isn't the most forgiving individual. He turned to see Yujito landing elegantly beside the genin she had sent flying through the window, looking down at him for a second before walking over to Jiraiya and Kakashi. She smirked. What? Did you think such a weak fool would be a match against me? Jiraiya smirked, and then turning to the ANBU nodded his head. He watched as the ANBU each grabbed a genin, immobilizing them with a few well-timed chops, and carried them away to the ANBU torture and interrogation department. Kakashi remained. So how is Naruto? The man asked. Looking more like his father every day, Jiraiya replied. Want a drink? I've got a full bottle open. The ANBU captain thought about it, then shrugged. Why not? My shift's over anyway. I take it you two know each other? Jiraiya asked. Yujito nodded. We know each other in passing. Indeed we do, Kakashi replied, then bowed slightly in apology. Forgive me for the jab I made at the Nibi during our spar. I was mad that I wasn't able to protect Naruto like I should have. So a Konoha nin doesn't rely on his or her own strength? She asked teasingly, to which Kakashi shrugged. This eye isn't mine, he replied, pointing to the eye hidden by the headband. I just wanted to see how good of a fighter you were without the Nibi's chakra. Yujito smirked, leaning in until their noses were barely a few millimeters apart. And how was my performance, Kakashi-senpai? To his credit, the copy nin managed to keep a slight blush off his cheeks at the close proximity. Even more so when he picked up a slight scent of jasmine. I reported to the Hokage that you were Jonin level at least, so he will probably hand you a flak jacket when you become an honorary shinobi. The blonde smiled, leaned back, and then made a motion with her hand. Drink? I don't know about you two, but this little incident has left me wishing for something strong. She turned, and walked into the apartment block. Both males followed, but Kakashi saw the perverted smirk on Jiraiya's face. What? Nothing. Hiruzen Sarutobi signed off another consent form, placing it on his rapidly building pile of finished paperwork, and reached for another only to find that there was nothing left to sign or stamp. He had been so engrossed in his work that he hadn't noticed the rapidly declining number of papers. The reason behind this was the thought swirling around the elderly Hokage's head. News of the failed assassination attempt had spread like wildfire throughout the village. The clans and elders were in an uproar, and were demanding an explanation for the skirmish that took place outside of Jiraiya's apartment. He had no choice. Any cover story he would try to implement would fail, and he had no doubt that either Fugaku, Uchiha, or Danzo would use this whole ordeal to try and get to Naruto. So he decided to surprise them. He sent out messages to each of the clan heads and elders of the Konoha Council of Fire, explaining the assassin's target, and asking for an emergency meeting to discuss the issue. Naturally, the replies were quick and crisp. The meeting was going to take place later that day. The door at the other side of his office creaked open, and the old man looked up wearily to see his former student walk right in. Besides the situation, he smiled. I swear this is the most times you've visited me in years. Plenty of work to be done, the spy master replied, taking a chair at the other side of the Hokage's desk. I take it you heard of the assassination attempt last night? The whole village knows about last night, Hiruzen replied, rubbing his temple, and I had no choice but to call an emergency meeting of the council. I can't keep their existence a secret from them any longer. Jiraiya nodded. So you want me to be there? You do have a hereditary seat, Hiruzen replied with a nod, and I could use your support. You have it, the Sannin nodded. What news have you been able to get from those wannabe child murderers? Ibiki sent me a file of the interrogations, the Sandaime replied. The 4 genin had suspicions that Kuru was being ordered from a higher up to kill Naruto, but they didn't ask nor care who. They just wanted to hurt the boy. And from what the on-duty Yamanaka was able to glean from their minds, they were going to make his death as slow and painful as possible. Well, they won't be alive much longer. Hiruzen nodded his head, saddened that 6 ninja who had served their village with honor for years would just willingly go against his orders like they did. It was saddening that the fear and hatred for the 9 tails could breed such dissolution. Hatred for the Kyuubi had dimmed through the years, but if this wasn't handled right, that hatred could shoot right back up again. Hopefully the fate of those responsible will serve as a deterrent. Hopefully, but not likely. The meeting was already in full swing by the time Sarutobi and Jiraiya arrived, and unlike last time, every clan was represented. Fugaku once again sat on his clan seat, smirking to himself, as the Hokage entered the chamber. The entire cavern was full of low murmurings and whispers, as he walked to his own chair, Jiraiya taking his place to the elderly Kage's right-hand side. This did not go unnoticed by the Uchiha. Jiraiya, what are you doing here? The Sannin looked over at Fugaku with a smirk. Taking my seat, Fugaku-san. All of the clans rose from their seats and bowed in respect, as Hiruzen took his chair, even the Uchiha, albeit hesitantly, and each took their seat when the old man himself took his. The Sandaime leaned forward, hands stapled together, as he surveyed the faces of all in attendance. Thank you all for coming, he began. I am sure all of you are aware of the skirmish which took place last night in the Shinobi district. 5 genin and 1 chunin tried to infiltrate an apartment owned by Jiraiya, attempting to assassinate one of his guests. Those shinobi have paid for it with their lives. But I know you are all wondering why this has happened, and I will tell you. The reason was, spare your lies, Hokage-sama. Fugaku spoke up from his chair. We all know why the shinobi were sent there. I was not going to, as you say, lie, Fugaku-san, Hiruzen replied, untouched by the man's blatant disrespect. In fact, I come before you with nothing but the truth. A week ago, Jiraiya stumbled upon a skirmish taking place within our borders between a unit of Kumo ANBU and a recently made nuke nin. He saw them off and escorted the kunoichi to Konoha to receive medical treatment. In her care was none other than Uzumaki Naruto. There were hushed whispers among several clan heads, which was silenced by a raised hand from the Hokage while she was receiving first aid. She asked that she and Naruto be given sanctuary from Kumogakure in exchange for her becoming a member of our shinobi ranks. And why should we accept some second-rate shinobi who is willing to betray her Kage for the sake of that? Boy, Fugaku sneered, causing Sarutobi to smirk. He had already asked Yujito for permission to let her secret be known, and she agreed. The reason why I am considering it, Fugaku-san, is because the Kunoichi is none other than Yujito, the Azure Cat of Kumogakure, the name creating some whisperings among the council. Almost everyone knew that name from the border skirmishes. A most powerful Kunoichi indeed, Shikaku whispered, but what are her terms for remaining in Konoha? Surprisingly few, the elder Hokage replied, knowing he was doing well in convincing the council to join his side in the matter. If not for Naruto, then for the knowledge that they would gain a powerful shinobi if they accepted in exchange for her loyalty. She wishes that Naruto remains with her, and she be able to adopt him. That is absurd. Fugaku almost roared. Allow her to take care of the boy. What if she tries to poison him against us? What if this whole thing is an elaborate trap so Kumo can strike? As to poisoning him against us, I believe this village's behavior to him would have done that quite well, Fugaku-san, Hiruzen replied evenly, and your accusations to her motives are quite unfounded. I have already asked the Yamanaka to probe her mind for any such deceit. Then he wasn't good enough. Are you questioning Inoichi-san's ability? Hiruzen asked, noticing the tensing of the Ino Shikacho trio because I asked for him to glean her mind personally. Well, what of the boy's seal? Danzo asked, stopping the bomb before it exploded. Has it been checked to see if it has been tampered with by Kumo? I have personally gone over the seal a half-dozen times to make sure. Jiraiya spoke up with a smile. Minato's seal work was truly amazing. I don't think I would have come up with something so intricate on my own. The seal is still firmly in place, and is as strong as it was when it was first put on. The Kyuubi isn't going anywhere. Be that as it may, perhaps it would be best to place a security detail around the boy, and his guardian. Danzo continued. He briefly cast his gaze upon Fugaku, as if insinuating something, but the fuming Uchiha barely noticed protection against any other assassination attempts. It is already being done, Danzo-san, Hiruzen answered. I have already chosen a half-dozen trustworthy NBU for the task, plus Jiraiya, and his guardian. Of course, Hokage-sama, Danzo replied with a nod. It was time for him to put his plan into action. But perhaps it would also be prudent for the boy's training and controlling the Kyuubi to begin sooner than later. Whether we like it or not, he has the ability to become a powerful asset to this village under the right supervision. Murmurings of agreement rose from all across the council table, and Danzo knew he had struck at exactly the right time. The council would never side with Fugaku, not with his cavalier actions, as of late, and he also knew he couldn't completely take over Naruto's training himself. But if he could even hold some influence over the boy, he could perhaps still mold him into the weapon he required. Oh, I agree, Hiruzen replied, surprising everyone in attendance, even Danzo. You do, the one-eyed elder replied, recovering quickly. Yes, the Sandaime smiled. I have already handpicked a teacher who I think is just right for the job. And that would be? Jiraiya, Hiruzen answered, placing a hand on his apprentice's broad shoulder. He knows the seal better than anyone, and his track record with training powerful shinobi is second to none. More whispers were heard as the council conversed, and it was obvious they were fairly positive. Jiraiya trained the Yondaime Hokage, the legendary Konoha no Kiroi Senko. There was no one else with such a track record, not even Danzo, and the old war hawk admitted that. So let us take this to a vote, Hiruzen said, raising to his feet all those in favor of Uzumaki Naruto, and Yujito joining the village of Konohagakure no Sato. A mass of hands came up, almost 3/4 of the council, followed by a few more hesitant ones a few moments later. Only Fugaku Uchiha's hand remained down, and the man looked like he wanted to destroy something because of it. The Council of Fire did not hate Naruto. Some resented him for the beast he held. Most were uncaring. But throw something sweet into the deal, say an A-rank shinobi, and the vote was decided. Thank you all for attending, Hiruzen smirked. I call this meeting to an end. As the council began to form ranks, and leave, a shadow fell upon the elderly Hokage, who looked up to see Danzo towering over him. The old war hawk hesitated for a moment, then sighed, and patted his shoulder, as he passed. Well played, Sarutobi, his old friend turned bitter rival conceded. Well played. That was easy, Jiraiya whispered slowly. Yes, the Hokage agreed, almost too easy. The four figures rushed from branch to branch deep within the forests of Hai no Kuni, chakra-enhanced leaps making them nothing more than blurs to the surrounding wildlife. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a small clearing came up before them, and without hesitation the lead figure jumped, landing in the middle of the clearing, surrounded by his 3 comrades, all 4 wire light gray cloaks, their heads hidden within the shadows of their hoods. The leader, characterized by his towering, muscular form even with the cloak, and the large sword strapped to his back turned to look at his 3 compatriots, and nodded. As one they pulled back their hoods, and looked around. Zabuza Momochi sighed, as he looked around, noticing the lack of animal calls. The forest was quiet, almost too quiet. His comrades seemed to notice this, as well. 2 others pulled back their hoods, revealing heads of spiky black hair. Kiri Shinobi Hittites worn to their foreheads, the plates modified with 2 metal horns. Each man wore gunmetal gray breathers, hiding the bottom half of their faces, yet their hard eyes were the eyes of a shinobi who had seen the horrors of war. Meizu and Gozu were twin brothers, Chunin level shinobi of Kiri before they joined Zabuza in his little rebellion. The 4th member was the smallest of the group, face covered by the white porcelain mask of an oinin with slanted eye holes, swirling symbols around the cheeks, and the Kiri symbol etched into the forehead. Hair was better kept than the twins, tied back in a bun with 2 long strands on either side of the face. Haku was by far the youngest at 10, but was already a capable shinobi under the former ANBU captain's tutelage. For the 100th time Zabuza went over the events which put them all in this situation. Kirigakure was falling apart at the hinges thanks to a civil war between the forces loyal to the Mizukage and the bloodline rebels led by Meiturumi. The assassination of the Mizu daimyo by his fellow swordsman Hoshigaki Kisame destabilized the nation even further. Zabuza could tell that something was wrong with the Mizukage, and had made plans to try and overthrow him, and take the title of Kage for himself. He had gathered a small, but elite force for that purpose. The Kiri swordsman had hoped to initiate a quick and bloodless coup d'etat, and then try to negotiate with Mei for a ceasefire, gain her loyalty by returning clan status to the bloodline families, and making her his successor. The woman may be stubborn, but she was also intelligent enough to see a good deal. The Mizukage had been tipped off. Zabuza and his small task force had been led into a trap set by half the ANBU corps. He gained a small satisfaction that he killed the traitor himself, but it was a hollow victory compared to the loss of 16 fellow shinobi whom he considered friends. In the end he was forced to withdraw, and run from Kirigakure with half of the village's Oinin corps mercilessly on their tail. They had lost them after entering Kaminari no Kuni. How far away are we from Konoha? He asked. Roughly 3 days at normal pace, Zabuza-sama Haku replied. The former swordsman nodded, then looked up past the canopy at the setting sun. We'll make camp here for now, normal watch pattern. We leave at first light. His subordinates all nodded their heads, and began making camp, the twins disappearing into the forest to search for wood and food while Haku began rummaging through the packs for sealing scrolls containing their equipment. Zabuza sat down in the center of the clearing, a small roll of cleaning utensils out, and his sword held firmly. He looked down at the blade, noticing the chips along the edges, and the dried blood. The failed coup had only taken place a week ago, and during the commotion afterward he found no time to clean his blade. None of the ninja were aware of another figure hiding well within the shadows of the surrounding trees. A shinobi wearing body-hugging black light armor, her head mostly hidden within a cowl and mask. Only the eyes were visible, a light blue in comparison to the darkness. Now are you sure you have everything? Naruto sighed, as Yujito continued to make a fuss, and decided to check himself over just to stop her from worrying. He wore a simple pair of dark green khaki pants with a dark amber shirt. Yujito didn't like orange, but he insisted, so they compromised, and a dark green jacket. A kunai holster was tied around his right leg, and a black duffel bag for his books was slung over his shoulder. Yeah, Mom, I got everything, he said with another sigh. The two of them were walking through the crowded streets of Konoha towards the academy where he would begin his training as a shinobi. In his opinion, it was sort of a waste of time. He knew all the techniques they taught. But Yujito insisted. She said that he needed to learn about Konoha, its history, its culture, its geography, and its shinobi system. House keys? Yes. Kunai holster? Yes. All of your books? Yes. She frowned at the name, but said it anyway. Gama-chan? He smirked, patting his pocket. Yes. Map of the academy? Yes. AAA grade explosive tags? You what? She smiled teasingly. Just testing. He frowned at her, before shaking his head. Geez. Yujito giggled at his pout, before setting her sights ahead down the street. Ever since the assassination attempt on Naruto some 3 days ago, things seemed to have settled down a little. Well, as little as the entire population knowing of the return of the demon child could get. For a time there were fearful whispers, but after a while that too had calmed. There had been no more assassination attempts since then. With the defeat and execution of the perpetrators, the message had been received loud and clear. At least that was what she hoped. There had been no such attempts on his life since, which was a fairly good thing in her eyes. As they walked down the street, she noticed the odd cold or hateful stare leveled in Naruto's direction, but then their gaze would pass across her, and they would immediately bow their head and quicken their step. It was mostly because while they were directing those stares at Naruto, she was directing a rather murderous glare at them. That coming from a regular human being was usually intimidating enough, but coming from a shinobi it could be downright terrifying, especially if she drew upon a trace amount of the Nibi's chakra to give her eyes a malevolent glow. Finally the academy building came into view, and without hesitation the two walked in through the front gates. Looking around, Yujito saw other parents coming and going, children playing games in the courtyard, lecturers watching them from the sidelines. All in all it looked like a regular school, and if one was ignorant to the subjects taught here they would believe as such. Excuse me? She turned her head at the voice in time to notice one of the lecturers walking up towards them. A fairly tall man dressed in the garb of a Chunin shinobi, the hetai bearing the symbol of Konoha tied around his forehead. His skin was a dark tan, sharp features with a scar across the bridge of his nose, and long dark brown hair, tied in a ponytail. The man came to a stop, and looked at his clipboard. Uzumaki Naruto, right? Yeah, that's me, Naruto replied. Hello Naruto, my name is Yumino Irika, and I'll be your teacher in the lectures, the man introduced with a smile, before setting his gaze on her. And you're his guardian, ni Yujito, right? Yes, she replied with a slight bow, which he returned. No need to worry ma'am, the young Chunin smiled. I'll take him from here. Yujito considered herself to be a pretty good judge of character. When one became a shinobi the way she did you kind of had to be. Looking at Yumino Irika she saw no malice or wish to do any wrong to either her or Naruto. Alright then, she said before ruffling her charges and shock of blonde hair, I'll be by to pick you up when you're done, alright? Don't worry about me mom. Naruto replied with a toothy grin. Just get going, you have a training session with Nasan, right? Can't let you get too rusty. She bonked him lightly on the head. Don't be rude. Sorry. Shaking her head in bemusement she turned to the instructor again, and bowed her head. I leave him in your care, Irika-san. Thank you, Yujito-san. She gave her charge one last look before turning, and walking out of the front gate. The little cub was right. She did have a training session with Hyuga today, and she was very much looking forward to it. Ever since her little examination spars with Kakashi she hadn't really had much of a chance to train, what with getting Naruto prepared for the academy, and all. Alright everyone, settle down. Irika barked mildly, as they entered the classroom. The class went quieter, and after a moment all eyes focused on him, and he had to admit that it was a little uncomfortable. As Naruto entered the classroom at the teacher's heels he looked up, noticing that the general layout was a tiered class, with the lecturer's desk, blackboard, and open space at the bottom, and tiers of desks going up 5 or 6 levels with a line of cupboards lining the back wall. Quiet down, the lecturer called out, silencing all other forms of conversation. I would like to introduce you to a new member of the class. He will be joining us late this year, so I want all of you to help him, alright? He then looked down at Naruto, and with a small smile nudged him forward. Go on, introduce yourself. Naruto looked up at the man. Irika-sensei was alright. He had listened to, and answered all of Naruto's questions, as he led him through the corridors to the classroom, and answered them to the best of his ability. He began, taking a step forward, and bowing his head. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I'm 8, and I just moved here. Thank you Naruto, Irika said before taking a quick look through the tiered class for a spare seat. Take the seat beside Hyuga Hinata. The blonde nodded, and shouldering his bag walked up the steps in the middle of the classroom, ignoring the questioning looks, as he walked by. Little did he know that there were some who were analyzing him, and wondering if what little they had heard was true. The two girls sitting on the 4th row, one with shoulder-length pink hair, and the other with long blonde hair done up in a ponytail, watched as the new kid walked by. The two girls, Sakura and Ino, waited until after he was out of earshot before they huddled together to whisper. He's pretty cute, the blonde whispered. Yeah, he ain't bad, the pinkette agreed. Not as good as Sasuke-kun though. Please, no one is as good as him? Ino chastised. Still, I wonder what he's like. I heard from my mom that he was a troublemaker, Sakura whispered. Ino snorted. Please, if we stayed away from everyone our parents didn't like, then life would be boring. A tear down, a boy with raven black hair and onyx-colored eyes watched, as the blonde walked to his seat, heard the murmuring of the girls behind him, rolled his eyes, and set his attention back to the instructor. Uchiha Sasuke had been told by his father to stay away from the new kid, that he was dangerous, but in truth his father's warning just got the young Uchiha curious. How dangerous could someone his age really be? He supposed he would find out soon enough. At the back of the class a round kid watched on, then turned to nudge his friend, who for all pretenses appeared to be dozing off in class. Hey Shikamaru, what do you make of him? Nara Shikamaru raised his head a few inches, creaking open an eyebrow to look at the blonde. He watched, as the boy sat down, then shrugged his head. Beats me, Chuji. We'll find out soon enough. Akamichi Chuji looked between his best friend and the new kid, before shrugging, and continuing to eat his barbecue pork flavor potato chips. Yeah, you're probably right. Completely oblivious to the conversations taking place around him, the blonde took a chair and turned to look at his new neighbor. The girl in question was interesting, with short dark blue hair, her pale face framed by long strands from the side of her fringe. Her face was round and dainty, but the most striking feature was her eyes, whose large pupils were a soft lavender in color. Hey, he whispered, watching, as she looked up at him, cheeks taking on a shade of red. Is it alright if I sit with you? She shied away a little, before whispering a stuttered SS sure. He smiled broadly at her before taking his seat, watching, as Iruka-sensei continued with the roll call for a few moments before leaning over to her. So what's your name? Mine's Uzumaki Naruto. She looked at him for a brief second. Hinata, Hyuga Hinata. Nice to meet you, Hinata-chan. Her cheeks took on a darker shade of red, pressing her fingers together nervously. And nice to meet you, and Naruto-kun. Training Ground 12 was for all intents and purposes your regular run-of-the-mill training ground, as far as Konoha was concerned. The area was cordoned off with barbed wire fences, stretched for almost 15 square kilometers, and was heavily forested with those huge, thick trunk trees that Hai no Kuni was famous for. It was through this very training ground that she was wandering, moving to try and find that ANBU agent who had invited her to train. Yugao Yuzuki came off as a caring person in Yujito's mind, which was a strange quirk in their profession. But although she hadn't seen her fighting ability firsthand, the blonde knew that she was a seasoned veteran, and had to be if she was in the ANBU Black Ops. Hey, a familiar voice called, and the former Kuminin looked up to the high branches to see her partner. Yugao was perched on one of the branches on the tree to her left, in a crouch, and looking down on her with mirth in her dark eyes. You made it. Yujito couldn't help but smile wryly. Of course, if I'm going to be a shinobi of this village, then I'll have to keep in shape. That's a good outlook. Her training partner smiled in response, before falling off the branch and landing in a perfect crouch. The woman was wearing her full ANBU armor, complete with a sword strapped to her back, and kunai pouches tied to her thighs. She rose up and called out into the forest, surprising her. Hey you guys, you said you wanted to meet her, right? So come on out. Two darkened silhouettes fell from the treetops, landing in crouches barely a few meters away. Both were definitely female, she could tell by their figures. Cautiously Yujito sent a questioning look at Yugao's way, only to see the woman with a small smile. Come on you two, you wanted to meet her. It's rude to just stay where you are. The two newcomers looked at each other, before timidly stepping into the light. Her previous assessment was accurate. Both were women, and Chunin if their attire was anything to go by. Both were similar in height, give or take a few centimeters, but that was where the similarities ended. The one to the left had pale skin, and long, flowing black hair. She was well formed, which was noticeable even though she was wearing the dark green jacket and protective Chunin vest. But the most striking feature about her was her long black hair, and her eyes, which were a rare blood red, almost like the Sharingan, but not quite as eerie. The one on the left was more tomboyish in appearance, but still physically attractive. She had long dark purple hair done up in a bit of a ragged ponytail, skin was slightly tanned, and eyes which seemed to be a pupilless light brown. She too wore dark green coveralls and Chunin vest, and like her associate she was pretty well formed, but she also wore a long tan trench coat which stretched to her ankles. Yujito ni. I would like to introduce to you Kurinai Yuhi and Anko Mitarashi, a couple of friends of mine. Yugao introduced, and Yujito bowed, and might as well be civil. Kurinai, the raven black-haired woman, returned the bow, but the one with the purple hair, whom she decided was Anko, stood there studying her for several moments, as if assessing her threat level. So is the kid at the academy? Yugao asked. I dropped him off before coming here. Yujito replied. Then that leaves more fun for us. The ANBU agent nodded. I don't know about you, but I've wanted to see what you can really do, and don't worry about his security. Kakashi's watching over the academy. That's good to know, the blonde replied. Kakashi seemed like a decent enough guy. Okay, he did have his little quirks, or flaws, like reading those orange-backed books in public, but after a while every shinobi gained little edges of insanity. Some were less crazy than others. She enjoyed relieving her stress by playing her shamisen, which she sadly had to leave behind in Kumogakure. I heard you were able to fight Kakashi for 20 minutes straight, Anko piped up. Is it true or just a rumor? The Nibi Jinchuriki seemed to think about it for a moment, before smirking. It was more like 30, but I wasn't really keeping track, and I think he went easy on me. The Kunoichi seemed to smile evilly, before producing a kunai from her trench coat. I want to fight you first, Anko Kurinai warned, but the warning seemed to fall on deaf ears, as the kunoichi vanished from view. "Sorry about this," Hyuga said with a sigh, only to turn to see her sparring partner was already in motion, jumping back up with a chakra-propelled leap to the branches above. Yujito didn't hear Yugao's apology, for the woman was already going through a set of hand signs, but Enko appeared before she could complete the sequence, forcing her to move her body ever so slightly to the right to avoid the kunai aimed for her heart. The blade just scraped her upper sleeve though, and the young woman's miss was her advantage, or so she thought. She barely registered the kunoichi go through the hand seals for the snake and tiger before making a punching motion with her free hand ninpo, Sanaijushu. 3 snakes appeared from her sleeves, ejecting along her arm before lashing out at Yujito, fanged mouths open to gauge into her flesh. The former ANBU jumped back, barely missing the attack by a couple of millimeters before retaliating by throwing the kunai she had fished out of her pouch. Enko readily dodged it, and retaliated by letting a handful of shuriken fly from her fingertips. Naruto stretched his arms up in the air with a happy sigh, enjoying the feeling of grass under his feet, and clean air entering his lungs. They had spent most of the morning sitting in that classroom listening to Irika-sensei going through the basics of chakra control, and the knowledge that they were outside going through a sparring class was a relief to the blonde. So far it seemed that they had 4 or 5 lecturers all teaching different classes. Irika-sensei was their homeroom teacher, and would be dealing with most of the basics including academics, mathematics, science, history, and the basic ninja arts. A guy named Mizuki-sensei was their taijutsu and physical activity instructor. Kambi-sensei was their advanced ninjutsu teacher. Rei-sensei was their advanced genjutsu teacher, and another guy named Shirzwa-sensei was their strategy and survival lecturer. At first, Naruto was excited about going to a new environment and meeting people his own age. While in Kumogakure his training had been focused mainly on controlling his chakra and teaching him the basic survival arts of a shinobi. He really hadn't been forced to go through all the academic stuff. Sure, he was slated to begin at the Kumo Academy, but the whole incident kind of made that impossible. He looked up at the spar taking place between 2 boys he didn't know, watching their sloppy movements, trying to copy the fighting techniques that Mizuki-sensei had shown them earlier on. The academy taijutsu was pretty basic, but he had seen a few different styles since the beginning. The kids who hailed from a clan all had their own styles and moves which they wanted to show off. He had seen Hinata-chan fight with a strange fighting art called Juken, and while her movements were as jittery and sloppy as one would expect from an 8-year-old, he had to admit that she was pretty good at it, like she had been practicing years before she entered the academy. He had talked with her during the lunch break, and at first he thought she didn't like him because of how she stuttered and how quiet she was, but his mother had taught him to look underneath. Hinata was just a shy girl who was unsure of herself, but after a while of poking and prodding her she began to speak with him with a little more confidence, and before long they began to talk about everything and anything. He found out that her mother passed away a year ago, and it was a blow she still felt to this day. He was so deep in thought that he didn't notice that the spar had ended, and Mizuki-sensei was going through his list of students. Next match will be Uchiha Sasuke vs. Uzumaki Naruto. A few seconds passed, but Naruto still didn't get up. Finally Hinata nudged Ano. "Naruto-kun, why you're up?" Her voice shook him from his thoughts, and he looked over at her with a questioning look, noticing a slight red on her cheeks. "Come on Uzumaki, get up here," Mizuki called out impatiently. "Oh right," Naruto replied, getting to his feet, and giving off a sheepish smile. "Sorry sensei." He looked over at his sparring partner. His black hair was spiked, his onyx eyes piercing, and his stance one of boredom. Naruto suppressed a sigh. This kid Uchiha Sasuke was fairly certain he would win, and win quickly. The blonde stood and walked over to the training mat, turned, and met the kid's gaze unflinchingly. "Hoo-hoo, go Sasuke-kun," a blonde-haired girl shouted. "Kick his ass," another stated. "He is so cool," a pink-haired girl yelled. 6 or 7 girls had jumped to their feet, shouting and cheering like a bunch of rabid fangirls. This was interesting. The school term had only started about a month ago, and even though he had transferred 3 weeks late, he wondered how so many girls could be so completely smitten by a boy they didn't know. It was probably because of his status as the youngest child of the Uchiha clan head, while Naruto and his mom were unknown. "Ready to lose?" Sasuke asked with a smirk, falling into a fighting style that was not the one taught at the academy. He spread his legs one in front of the other, bent his knees, reeled back his left arm, and reached out with his right. Naruto snorted, analyzing his opponent's every movement. That's got to be the worst fight line in existence. The Uchiha's grin faded slightly. "Do you even know who I am? A name means nothing if you don't have the skills that come with it," Naruto replied, falling into the most basic of the Torakuwa style, As long as he didn't show off any of the special moves or advanced forms, he should be fine. Basic attack pattern, swipe, and claw, block, and simple takedown grapples. His words were getting through, for Sasuke looked rather annoyed. From the side, Mizuki analyzed Naruto's posture and stance, and immediately knew it wasn't the basic fighting style he was teaching. It seemed that the demon brat had picked up a few things during his little sojourn into Kumo. How dare he mock Sasuke-kun? Make him eat the training mat, Sasuke-kun. Begin! Sasuke moved first, coming straight at Naruto at a dead run. In response, Naruto took a step back, waiting to see if his opponent made any last-minute changes to his trajectory. He didn't. The blonde easily blocked the straight punch, and then raised his other arm to take the follow-up roundhouse kick. He was good, but the counter made Sasuke lose balance, and it was close-quarters fighting like this that the Black Tiger style was made for. Quickly, Naruto rotated his hand to grip Sasuke's ankle, then brought up his other hand to get a hold of the Uchiha's leg. He spun, coming down in a crouch, and took Sasuke to the mat. The Uchiha landed hard on his back, the air forced from his lungs. Silence reigned in the training ground. Even Mizuki looked at the scene in complete surprise. Then there was uproar from Sasuke's fangirls. Some, like the Pinkette, actually looked like they were about to use violence. He can't do that. Yeah, he must have cheated. Another yelled. He did not cheat. What Naruto did was perfectly legal. The instructor frowned at them before straightening and raising his hand. Winner, Uzumaki Naruto. While the fangirls started to argue again, some were looking at the scene in amusement. Naruto Shikamaru opened his eyes with a raised brow. That was actually pretty good. His friend, Chuji, looked at him while eating through his bag of potato chips. Do you really think so? Yeah, Naruto replied, leaning back on his elbows. He wasted no movements, and executed the counter perfectly. Kiba leaned in, a smirk on his face. It's always nice to see one of those Uchiha losers get creamed. I don't know who this Naruto is, but I like him. You guys want to invite him over sometime? Chuji asked. It's troublesome, Shikamaru replied. A lazy smile appeared on his face. But why not? Naruto let go of his fallen opponent, and offered him his hand. The boy looked at him for a moment, before grudgingly accepting the help, pulled back to his feet. Damn, that hurt. Sasuke muttered, what was that? Just a few moves I picked up from my mom. Naruto replied with a shrug. It was technically true, and the best lies were always told with partial truths. Don't get too comfortable, Sasuke whispered hoarsely, still trying to regain his breath. I'll beat you next time. To his surprise, Naruto smiled. Good. It would be boring if someone won all the time. With that, Naruto turned, walking back over to the crowd of students, trying his hardest to ignore the murderous stares from half the female population. Sasuke looked at the blondes retreating back, and allowed himself a smirk. Looks like there's someone here who isn't a waste of space after all. Naruto sat back down next to Hinata, who stared at him with wonder for a few moments. What was that? Naruto looked at her quizzically. What was what? That stance, that S-style, it wasn't any of the taijutsu arts from the academy. Oh right. It's called the Torakuwa. It's one of the Wuxing, the 5 animal forms of taijutsu. Naruto explained with a smile, before looking behind her, and ducking his head, a sudden look of fear on his face. Timidly, Hinata turned her head to see the murderous glares of at least a half dozen of Sasuke's fan club descend upon him. Besides the situation, she frowned. So what if Naruto-kun defeated the almighty Sasuke Uchiha? The great walls of Konohagakure stood out in front of them, a huge sheer face which stretched off into the horizon to their left and right. This was an imposing sight for any opposing army, so for a small task force of Nupnin this was nothing out of the ordinary. Konoha was enjoying a time of peace, and while they still posted guards on the towers and walkways, they were going to be lax. The 4 had changed from their shinobi gear to civilian garb, hiding their weapons, and their boss's massive sword inside small scrolls, easily hidden on their persons thanks to their drab brown cloaks. They passed through the main gates without much of a problem, easily sneaking in thanks to the continuous stream of merchants, traders, and tourists coming in and out of the city. Zabuza smirked, his observation on the village's external security being well-founded. When one enjoyed peace for so long, it was common for the security to be so relaxed. But he also knew that looks were deceiving. The former Kiri swordsman had felt the presence of shinobi watching in the shadows, most likely the normal patrols, and a couple of ANBU. They needed to remain on their guard. He frowned suddenly, missing the familiar weight of his executioner's blade on his back, but took a little solace in knowing he was not alone in his discomfort. The twins were obviously used to not wearing their breather masks and chain gauntlets, but they were adapting to the change. Haku, on the other hand, seemed right at home walking the streets, showing no signs of discomfort or nervousness. The 4 walked through the streets with no trouble, and found a small cafe, took chairs, and ordered food. As the waitress finished jotting down their order, and walked back to the kitchen. Zabuza leaned in, his 3 compatriots following suit. Right, here's the plan, he whispered, locking eyes with each of them in turn. His eyes finally fell on the youngest of their group, Haku. You will search for the boy, check the academy grounds, and if you can't find him there, spread out the search. Hi Zabuza-sama. The swordsman nodded, before setting his gaze on the 2 brothers Meizu, Gozu, you, and me will split up, and spread out. Search for the woman, and wait for the opportunity to strike. Hi Zabuza-sama. The food came within minutes, and the 4 former Kiri shinobi dug in, eating their fill, and silently toasting to their mission's success before they rose, and left together. They walked up the street to a crossroad, and then separated, moving in different directions. Zabuza walked quietly through the village streets, noticing a small squad of Konoha shinobi fly across the rooftops on his right. It was not a surprise to see that the shoppers, vendors, and merchants surrounding him didn't pay the passing-by ninja any mind. They were probably used to such displays. He was not worried about the brothers. Sure, they were chunin, but they were capable, and had a dozen espionage missions under their belt. They knew how to melt into a crowd, and not get caught. Even if they were caught, he had taught them enough of his methods to remove the threat quickly. Haku was still young, and slightly inexperienced, but the child was skilled, and showed an impressive way of adapting to any situation. The preteen had gone on espionage missions for him for years, and was almost notoriously resourceful. He didn't worry about his apprentice either, but there was something about this place that unnerved him. The air seemed thick with tension, not from the civilians, but from the few shinobi he had spotted. They were more alert, almost like they were expecting an attack to come at any moment. For a fleeting second the demon of the mist wondered if their mission had been found out. Had their employer leaked information to Konoha to be on the lookout for them? He shook it off. If they were worried about an external threat, they would have tightened the security around the main gates. Peacetime or not, it had to be something else. But what? His answer came more willingly than he was comfortable with. A small group of Konoha shinobi could be seen at the corner of the market he had just walked through, their eyes hardening at someone's arrival at the other end. Another small group of Konoha shinobi were walking into the square, and by their black hair, an almost arrogant aura, the swordsman hazarded a guess that they were Uchiha. The stares exchanged showed him everything, and the adage of killer intent only added to his speculation, not enough for the surrounding villagers to notice. But to a ninja it was like a neon sign was going off. There was a dispute within the village, and it threatened to become violent. The demon considered this hypothesis, wondering if this would benefit the mission or hinder it. Damn it, Enko growled, as she nursed her arm, knowing that she was going to feel it for a while. I tried to warn you, Kurenai said dryly, as the 4 women walked down the streets towards the village center. Shut up. Kurenai's right, Enko, Yugao spoke up with a smirk. Charging right in without a backup plan against a former ANBU captain was never going to be a good idea. Yujito walked with the group, a little to the left, and lagging a step behind, watching, as they bantered, and talked about their training session with a familiarity born from working together for years. She felt a little like a third wheel, not knowing those present well enough to join in. Hey Blondie, Enko said, turning her head with a wicked smirk adorning her features. For a second Yujito thought the purple-headed Kunoichi was going to try and goad her again, but was surprised. I enjoyed fighting with you. Want to join us again? Same time tomorrow. I don't believe it, Yugao said, feigning disbelief. Enko Mitarashi has warmed up to a person after meeting them. The world is about to end. Ah, shut up, a lot of you, Enko cried half-heartedly before fixing the blonde with a grin. What do you say? Want to join us again? Yujito was surprised by the ready acceptance. It was never this easy to get people to warm up to her in Kumo. Ah, sure. The woman's grin seemed to grow wider, before she strutted forward, hands holding onto the back of her head in a reminiscent gesture to a certain hyperactive person she knew. In fact, she found that Enko was like Naruto in so many ways, hyperactive, playful, boisterous, but with a quiet intelligence working in the background. I say we celebrate your joining our little training group with a celebration. Anyone for Dango? Enko shouted out, raising her fist high into the air. Kurenai shrugged. Why not? I'm not on duty for another hour. Yugao added. What's Dango? Yujito asked, gaining a look of pre-shock from the boisterous Kunoichi. You're kidding, right? Enko asked, half in disbelief, the other in shock. They don't have Dango in Kumo. Yujito answered the question with a stupefied shake of the head. By the gods, you can't be serious. The Kunoichi crowed. Okay then, newbie. Prepare to be enlightened. Oh dear, Yugao muttered with a smirk. Here we go again. Kurenai whispered to herself. Dango is food given down to us from the gods themselves, Enko began, spinning around, and planting her hands around her hips, a face-splitting grin on her face which forced her eyes shut, as she spoke. It is by far the most delicious and nutritious food in the whole world. Anyone who doesn't know of its existence must be enlightened. Yujito's gaped ever so slightly, That was almost exactly what Naruto said the first time he had dragged her to a ramen stand. Enko noticed her disbelieving look, and raised a brow in confusion. What? The former Cuminant shook her head to dispel the memory, before smiling sheepishly. Nothing, it's just that you remind me of someone. Oh, Enko asked, who? That was exactly what Naruto said the first time he took me to a ramen stand. Yujito explained, smiling slightly at the memory. Subconsciously Yugao smiled. As well, the kid was a little infectious with his happy-go-lucky attitude. Enko however stuck up her nose, but not at Naruto's name being mentioned. She, like all the others here, had no real resentment towards the boy. In fact, the woman could relate to the kid to a certain degree. Both had been village pariahs because of something which happened that was out of their control. Ramen's alright I suppose, but it will never beat Dango. Yo. That lazy voice was unmistakable to the three Konohanan present, and looking up they saw that their suspicions were correct. Kakashi Hatake was sitting on the top of an electric pylon pool, a certain orange book in his hand. To anyone who didn't know him it looked like he was reading, only absently noticing them. Always reading in the strangest of places at Kakashi? Yugao smirked. The copying shut his book, and placed it snugly within one of his vest pockets before hopping down to the ground. He stooped over, hands in his pockets, as he approached them. I need to talk to Yujito-san for a moment, is that alright? The blonde blinked, before nodding. Sure. You want us to stick around? Enko asked. Kakashi's alright, but he can be a little perplexed if you don't know his habits. I'll be fine. Your funeral. Enko snorted before continuing her walk down the street. Kurenai looked after her friend before absently shaking her head. When it comes to Dango there's nothing in heaven or earth which can stop her. When you're done with whatever Kakashi wants, the shops on the next left, called Jet's Tea House, will probably be there for a couple of hours. Thanks. Yugao smiled her way, before patting her on the shoulder, and moving to catch up with her two friends. Yujito watched them go, and then turned to see Kakashi already walking in the opposite direction, his posture stooped, and his hands in his pockets. The blonde frowned before walking after him. Weren't you supposed to watch over Naruto today? I left two guys I trust, Kakashi replied with that eye smile of his. Don't worry, he's in safe hands. So what did you want to talk to me about? She asked. Keep walking for a minute or two, was his whispered reply. His eyes shot down the street in time to see a figure shadowing them. It was difficult to make out features considering the black cloak the person was wearing, obscuring his or her face in shadow. They turned several times into several streets, and although this person was doing well to hide his or her presence, he still noticed her, half hidden in the thinning crowds. Kakashi looked her way, and then spoke quietly. Have you noticed yet? My senses are getting dull. Yujito frowned, before turning on Kakashi. Wait, how did you find out I was being followed? I was on a rooftop reading my book. Kakashi explained. Saw you all wandering through town, and then noticed him on your tail. You were spying on me, she said dryly, smirking, as she noticed him flinch. Jiraiya-sama asked me to keep an eye on you, he defended. The only men I know in this village are a bunch of peeping toms, and perverts. She muttered dryly to herself. Great. Well, if I wasn't there would you have noticed your stalker? Eventually, she replied. The copying actually had to take a couple of deep, calming breaths, and mentally count to 10 before he could respond. For some reason this woman was getting under his skin. Can we talk about this later? Right now the best thing to do is to lead this little stalker of yours into a trap. Fine, she pouted, folding her arms under her impressive bust with a huff. Kakashi rolled his one visible eye. Could she be any more childish? Finally he saw the turn he was looking for, and changed his direction, Yujito following suit. They waited until they were a couple of meters in before launching themselves off the ground with a couple of chakra-propelled leaps, landing silently on the rooftops above. The alleyway was a dead end, only 10 meters leading to a high wooden fence. They sat there, but didn't have to wait long, as the figure hesitated for a moment before casually walking into the alley. He took 3 steps before coming to a halt, noticing the dead end, and looking around. It was then that the two had their chance. They fell from the rooftops, Kakashi landing between their stalker and the wooden fence, and Yujito blocking his escape to the road. The figure looked at the copy before spinning around to see the Azure Cat blocking his or her other escape route. Who are you? Kakashi asked, his tone no longer that of an aloof and lazy man, changing to one of merciless steel. Why were you following her? The cloaked figure looked like he was about to make a move, but was too slow. Yujito's hands blurred into action, easily making the signs of the ox and the snake before slamming her hands to the ground. Doton, Seppuku to Goku. The earth between her and their assault began to heave, and before their foe could even move he was held immobile by a circle of jagged rock spikes, protruding from the ground around him, and holding him in place. The blonde smirked before slowly closing her hands, leaving indentations in the soil. The spikes elongated by an inch, digging fractionally into the stalker's skin, making him know her, whimper slightly. Not a bad jutsu, Kakashi commented with a whistle. You've got quite a few of these immobilization techniques. Yujito shrugged. Now then, the copying began, reaching into his pouch for a kunai. Who are you, and why were you following her? Yujito saw his look, and closed her hands by another inch, making the sharpened tips of the spikes elongate by a couple of centimeters, nearly tearing through their assailant's outer layer of clothing. Why were you following me? The woman, definitely a woman, tried to reply, but was gasping for breath. To warn you, Onizen? Onizen? She whispered before her eyes widened slightly. Quickly she dispelled the jutsu, and Kakashi watched stunned, as the spikes shortened, melding seamlessly back into the earth. What are you doing here, Samui? He looked down on the bodies of the two ANBU agents, then at the destruction wrought all around them. Kunai and shuriken were strewn across the clearing, embedded in the trees, and sunken into the two men, blood trickling from their wounds, and pooling on the ground. He noticed a glint, and looked down to see an ANBU mask, crafted into the visage of a thrush at his feet. Blood spattered across the white porcelain. Silently he bent down, and picked it up, staring through the slanted eye holes before turning to his subordinate. The other man, a chunin, eyed the mask for a couple of seconds, looking a little at what they had done. Any casualties? He asked, dropping the thrush mask on the blood-soaked earth. They made a fight out of it, the chunin stated, his eyes drawn to the visage of the thrush. 2 of our boys are dead, another will soon follow. There's no turning back now, the man stated, catching the shinobi's attention. Do you have the headbands? The chunin nodded before producing a half-dozen Haiti items from a satchel under his arm, tossing one to the leader. He eyed the white cloth, and the 3 clouds adorning the metal. It was a perfect replica of the Kumo headband, so much so that no one would know if it was a fake or not. Good work, he said. Pass them out among the men, tell them to hide their own headbands, and wear these. Hi Uchiha-sama. Uchiha Yuki smirked at the Hittite, before replacing his own Konoha headband with it. This was perfect, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. They would kill the demon brat here, make it look like Kumogakure were the perpetrators. All attention would go to them, and while the Hokage was distracted, the Uchiha would make their move. When the week ended, Konohagakure would be a new village under new leadership. Fugaku Uchiha would be the Godame Hokage, and the Uchiha clan would finally get what was rightfully theirs. The reign of the Senju was over, the reign of the Uchiha was about to begin. Back in Kumo, he would usually be put through training sessions with his mother, Samui Nei-chan or Karabi-sensei, and his students. They had taught him a great many things, mostly on how to control his chakra, and how to defend himself. If it wasn't for his mom, he would never have learned the basics so well, including tree walking, and basic ninjutsu. If it wasn't for Nei-chan, he would never have progressed so well in his taijutsu. If it wasn't for sensei and his students, he would have never learned how to fight with a sword, and a couple of more advanced jutsu that they made him promise to keep secret. Naruto missed those times, missed everyone he had befriended in Kumo. Hell, he even missed Reikage-sama. But mostly because when he visited, the huge man would pass him sweets, and teach him some basic politics. He may have gained a reputation of being short-tempered and violent, but to him Reikage-sama was always calm and patient. If you want to be a Kage someday, you'll have to learn this stuff. With those words, Naruto immediately sat up straight, and paid attention, and the man laughed boisterously at the change in attitude. He may have been born here, but this place did not hold nearly as many happy memories. When he finally convinced Karabi-sensei, Karune, and Omuyanii to try ramen, and got them completely addicted to the stuff. When he experienced his first Kumo thunderstorm, Samui Nei-chan stayed with him, and his mother let him sleep with her at night. How when he was training with her, he was never afraid of being hurt, because his cousin would always be there to catch him. He was thankful that his mom was still here, but he missed his Nei-chan, his sensei, and his friends. Naruto understood why they had to leave, but suddenly moving from one place to another was a hard thing to get used to, especially a place with such bad memories. At least he had regained Gigi, which was something at least. Classes at the academy had ended for the day, and he had decided to get some training in before he went home. Thanks to Iruka-sensei, he had found the academy training grounds, open to all students and teachers, and set to work, going through all the basic katas of the Torakura Taijutsu. He was still making mistakes on the second and third stances, and was determined to improve. He heard a snap, and spun around, eyes darting around the lawn, and the circles of trees surrounding him. Then he saw someone wandering around at the edge of the woods, looking around, as if searching for something. The girl looked around his age, maybe a year or 2 older than him. She wore a pink kimono, adorned with flowers in blues and greens. Her hair was black and straight, reaching down to her shoulder blades. Skin was smooth, and eyes a dark brown. In her hands was a basket of some kind, half full with plants. The girl crouched, reaching for some herb at the base of one of the oak trees before seemingly noticing him staring. She turned around, eyeing him for a moment before bowing her head. "Good afternoon." "Hey," Naruto replied, a little unsure of this person. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, I'm sorry," she apologized. "I was looking for herbs for a few medicines, and this was one of the only places where I could find them." "No, it's alright," Naruto placated with a smile. "I just thought only shinobi and students were allowed to use the training grounds." The girl smiled disarmingly, before looking at him closely. "I saw you practicing. Isn't it a little late to be out on your own?" He looked sheepish, a silly grin on his face. I'm just trying to get down this fighting style my mom was showing me. I'm still a little off on the second and third stances." The girl nodded before piercing Naruto with an inquisitive stare. "What's your name?" "You first," Naruto shot back lightly. "You don't trust me? I've just met you." Naruto shrugged. She smiled. "Haku, my name is Haku. Uzumaki Naruto." Naruto returned, shaking her hand. Her eyes widened slightly at his name, almost in realization, before reverting back to normal. "So what are you doing?" "A friend of mine is sick," Haku replied, as she started searching through the grass. "I'm looking for a certain herb which will ease his pain. Do you need any help?" She looked at him for a moment, before smiling. "Sure, it's a blue flower with a red center." The two of them started to look around, slowly searching through the grass and underbrush for the herbs she was looking for. Naruto caught on quickly, and soon began to recognize the plant Haku was looking for. "Tell me, Naruto, why do you want to be a shinobi?" "Well, my mom is a shinobi," Naruto replied absently, peering at a small plant that looked like what they were looking for. "I guess you can say she inspired me." "I see," Haku replied, picking another flower and depositing it into her basket. "Is that the only reason?" "What do you mean?" "The life of a shinobi is a harsh one, and most don't survive long," Haku explained. "There must be another reason why you want to be a shinobi." The blonde was silent for a moment, before sighing. He didn't know why he was about to tell her this, but before he knew it he was talking. "I suppose there are other reasons. I want people to stop looking at me in fear. I want to become someone people look up to and count on." "Why do people look at you in fear, Naruto-kun?" she asked with a frown. He laughed. "People in this village just seem to either hate me or are afraid of me. I have no idea why, but they do." Haku looked up at him, studying the boy before her intently. "So you want to be a shinobi for power and recognition?" "No," Naruto replied, blushing a little under Haku's gaze. "I want to be a shinobi so I can protect those I consider precious to me." "So you are working to become a shinobi to protect those precious to you?" "Yeah, everything I do is to protect those I care about," Naruto explained. "If they weren't there I don't know how my life would turn out. I would have probably become the monster some people treat me as. I want to become a shinobi to protect those who rescued me from that." "Then you know where true strength comes from." Haku smiled, and at Naruto's curious glance verified. The true strength of a shinobi does not come from his strength, nor the jutsu he or she knows. I believe a shinobi's true strength only comes when you are protecting someone precious to you. Don't you agree, Naruto-kun? Naruto was now looking at her, before smiling. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Haku rose from her sitting position, dusting herself off. You will be a strong Naruto-kun, I know it. Thanks. Haku smiled, before turning to leave, but before she did she stopped, and turned to face him. Oh, and by the way, I'm a boy. Naruto looked at her, not him in shock. No way in hell, he's prettier than any girl I've met. You can't be serious. Haku laughed at his expression. It's true. Suddenly the boy's head darted to the left, a serious look written on his face. In a flash a trio of needles flew into his hands, and were thrown into the treetops. Naruto looked at him, shocked before staring at the point in the trees where the needles were thrown. In a blur the two found themselves surrounded by 5 shinobi, all wearing Konoha Chunin attire, all gripping onto kunai. The leader smirked at the two, seeing Naruto jump to his feet, and wearily pull out a kunai. Today is the day you die, demon brat. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.